and seems like it was quite a success. So hopefully that will happen again. One additional event that I noted last time, but wanted to put out a reminder, is tomorrow we have a Safe Routes to School community workshop at the Healdsburg. I believe it's at the high school library. This is obviously focused on transportation to schools, but really a broader conversation as well about safety of transportation in general, and a great opportunity for people who might have an interest in that topic to come and meet with our staff, ask questions, provide feedback. And we value those opportunities just to hear from people and understand what their concerns are. And this will be part of developing future work plans for improvements to transportation infrastructure. One other update I mentioned last time, we have a survey out right now for our fire department standards of cover study. I'm guessing a standards of cover study survey probably doesn't jump off the page for people in terms of drawing them in. We've had okay responses so far, but would love to see more. So I'm just putting out a reminder to community members who might be listening and to the council and staff that we'll try to push the word out a little bit more. That's a technical term, but really what we're trying to do is define the nature and level of service that we can provide with our fire department for years to come. Looking at the resources we have available, which includes a new countywide sales tax for fire prevention, and trying to determine the best models of staffing, operations, programs to best serve our community. So we'd love to, we ask for everybody's help in just getting into that survey and really sharing what people's priorities are and vision is for fire protection services into the future. I'll also note, since I don't see our fire chief here, and I'm not sure if there's been any chatter out there, but our engine company and both chiefs are on a structure fire this evening in Geyserville. So they're providing that as a mutual aid service. We do have an engine from Northern Sonoma County Fire, which is backfilling at our station. So Healdsburg is covered. But if you don't see the chief here while I'm talking about that fire survey, know that he's out there working. And the last update I'll provide, I know there's some folks here who are interested in a station area plan that we'll be talking about later. And I just wanted to share that we are working closely with SMART on a community meeting, which will be timed roughly, or is intended to provide community information related to the start of their construction and their construction project of getting to Healdsburg. We get a lot of questions. Everybody wants to know when, but we also get more detailed questions about the nature of construction, the timing of it, what the impacts might be to neighboring businesses or residents. And SMART has committed and has been really a great partner in terms of being willing to come up and work with us to promote meetings. I don't have a date completely nailed down right now, but we're expecting the last week of March. And once we have that date, we'll work with SMART and we'll really push that out. It will, of course, be here in town and focused on the Healdsburg extension. So I know we as staff get a lot of questions. I'm sure the council does also. So we appreciate their willingness to come up and spend time with the community. I don't imagine it will be the last opportunity to engage, but it will be a good one for all of those questions. So just want to let you know that we're working on that and we'll have a date really soon. I think that's all I have. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, do we have any questions for city manager? Just a quick one. I assume the repair fair was considered successful. We'll do it again, maybe next year, or any plans?
I don't want to speak for the county waste folks who would put that on unless our public works director does, but it was, while he's walking up, I'll say I was impressed with the results. So I would say successful, yes.
It is likely. I don't believe there's a schedule yet. They gauge these based on success. They will come back more frequently when they have a lot of attendees. And I think this one went well, and I will get an update on schedule at some point and I'll pass it on to the city manager.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. This time is set aside to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest, not on the agenda, but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the city council cannot consider any issues or take action on any request during this comment period. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council. I really prefer not to be in this very racist city where you have approximately 0% Black people. I'm very grateful that Councilman Edwards is here because last time I was here during the pandemic, I had to shut your meetings down for 3 months. You had an incredible council colleague, Ms. Skylar Palacios, who's Black and Latina. And Ms. Kelly was so threatened by that woman that she didn't want to be in the same room as her, and actually had her kicked off the DEI committee so she could take over. So I do not tolerate racism or monopolies or favoritism of any kinds in government. So I need to talk about the permitting process for cannabis. Mr. Levine and Mercy Wellness, I buy most of my weed there because I appreciate their bud tenders. I appreciate the lounge they have that is beautiful. And I believe they scored #1 during the permitting application process, yet they were denied a permit. So your city attorney's aware, you all are aware because I did report it to the Fair Political Practices Commission, but you guys were all paid off, and I can show you were paid off. And Mr. Levine has a tremendous lawsuit against you all. So, Mr. Hagley, how is it that you launched, Summit State Bank launched a cannabis pilot program in 2022 when you approved Measure M, the cannabis tax, and then you gave a cannabis permit to Jane, who was a client as of 2022 with Summit? And that's in the application. It says, oh, they're guaranteed to have a banking relationship in Healdsburg already because they're with Summit. And you guys were in a financial deficit due to the pandemic. So you literally were paid off. And then Ms. Kelly got paid off by Soulful and Jane. They donated to her assembly campaign. So that is a violation of the Levine Act. So basically, I'm here today. I had to drive, an hour and a half to tell you to act right, because if you don't revoke the 2 permits from Jane and Soulful, I'm going to have to do what I do, which is protest you guys, which we've seen that. I made the news in Texas. Protest the dispensaries. I'm happy to shut them down too. And also, who's involved in all of this? Supervisor James Gore seems to be involved in tremendous fraud tied to Eli Melrod with Soulful. So I've been writing about that. I know some of you guys have seen it. My other issue is that your city attorney's middlemaning deals for council. Saggio Hills, Councilman Hagley was supposed to abstain. You got a letter from the Fair Political Practices Commission telling you he was required to recuse. What do you do all of 2025? Hey, you know what? Vote approve Saggio Hills. Saggio Hills, what was it? 5 different motions. That's highly illegal. So I can continue to prove illegalities every day. It's not that hard. You guys are extremely corrupt. God bless you. Ms. Kelly, when you fly to the homeland of Israel, I hope you meet Jesus. God bless you.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is James Kemp. I live up in Enso Village, and I bike down the Foss Creek bike path a lot. That's my primary way of getting from Enso down into the city and back. After the recent rain in December, the bike path was completely impassable for 2 weeks because it was flooded. There were several places where a hill comes down to the bike path, and then water was leaking out over the bike path. In some places, there was mud coming down onto it. Now, relatively shortly, there's going to be families moving up in there, and I'll bet their mothers will want their kids to be taking their bikes to school. And I'm sure they won't want them to come back with a brown stripe up their back. So I would really recommend that you spend a little bit of money in the upcoming budget to put in proper drainage and do in some places the path goes like this, so the water goes down in the middle instead of like that, so that it goes off to the sides. There's many places there that need improvements in the drainage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Well, good evening, Council. My name is John Thomas. I also live in Enso Village, so we came down together in the same car. I came to speak with you in May of last year about the Laura Fish Somersault Park project. The concern I had then was that the first phase did not include a off-leash dog area in the first phase, and expressed the concern that and desire that you include it because of the fact that if it's not done soon, the population of the dogs in North Village would not have easy access to an off-leash dog area. Enzo Village, as you know, is a retirement community. It's made up of elderly folks. It's a little bit more difficult for them to access the other off-leash dog areas in Healdsburg. In terms of the numbers, I thought I would update you on that. You know, we're almost fully occupied. We have roughly 50 dogs at the present time. And the mixed-use apartment building across Boxart Drive is going to be completed, I would think, this year. It will also have dogs present there. I just spoke to Appalachian today, asking them about their policy regarding dogs, and they do welcome dogs, not at all in all the units, but in many of them, up to 2 dogs per unit. So what I'm looking at is a lot of dogs in North Village, and hoping that, you know, we can consider expanding the program to include the off-leash dog area in the first phase. There's also going to be some in Saguio Hills, 48 apartments coming online, I would imagine later this year. That will generate yet more dogs. So we've created through your rezoning a lot of occupancy, a lot of residents living in that area. And my hope is that you would consider expanding the scope to include that off-leash dog area, so we would have something readily available to our population. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else? Welcome.
Good evening, Linda Cade, Mill District. I was suspicious about what Adina's talking about when all the weed stores were applying to come here, and that's kind of, I don't know what the recourse is, but it's interesting to know. And I brought some statistics from Sonoma County Transit because at the last meeting, Ariel Kelly said multiple times that nobody rides the bus, but actually thousands of people ride the bus. And so I brought the Sonoma County Transit spreadsheet about how many people ride the bus, because the climate mobilization strategy, micro mobility policy, which sounds like we want to provide free rides to people. I really don't know what that is, but instead of putting people out of business like taxi cab drivers or Lyft or Uber, the city of Healdsburg already put women driving women out of business. So a business owner doesn't have a business now because of the DASH program, and at least 12 people are out of jobs because of that. So I'll leave this here so everybody can see how many people actually ride the bus, up to over 1,000 a month.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else for public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second?
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Higley,
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly,
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Herod.
Yes, thank you. There are no public hearings tonight. We'll move on to old business, the Healdsburg Station Area Specific Plan with Community Development Director Scott Diven. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. My goal this evening is to provide a brief update on the Healdsburg Smart Station Area Specific Plan and next steps. Next slide. So as many of you may have heard, there's a train coming to Healdsburg. Construction is anticipated to start pretty much imminently, I believe, here in 2026, and they're hoping to complete it in late 2028. Healdsburg's in a really unique position to develop a vision and a plan for how it can now take advantage of this opportunity and this new resource coming to town. Next slide. With the planned smart station, Healdsburg is subject to MTC's Transit-Oriented Communities Policy. The Transit-Oriented Communities Policy applies to all cities that have what they call a sorry, I'm blanking on the proper term that they have, but anyway, that has a significant transit station. In the case of Healdsburg, that's going to be a smart rail station. And with that policy comes a focus on areas that are within a half mile of that station. It seeks to align housing, employment, transportation, and environmental protection. It seeks to promote transit-supportive, inclusive communities that are accessible to people of all incomes. And it looks to support regional transit investments in the form of ridership. There's a real big push from the regional funding agencies to link their investments in transportation to land use policy in the hopes of increasing ridership and supporting those investments. It's also important to note that compliance with this transit-oriented communities policy is voluntary. However, it is going to be increasingly tied to future funding and the city's competitiveness. So funding programs such as One Bay Area Grant, are also known as OBAG, which I believe was the lion's share of our funding for Healdsburg Avenue. Those types of grants in the future are going to be looking towards compliance with this policy. Next slide. The transit-oriented communities policy has 4 guiding goals. It's to increase housing supply and affordability near transit, to increase office densities near regional hubs, to prioritize transit, walking, biking, and shared mobility, and to support equitable transit-oriented communities. Next slide. Recognizing the challenges that many communities have, especially those that are outside of the Inner Bay area in meeting this policy, MTC established a grant program to help communities achieve compliance. To that end, they started the MTC TOC Planning and Implementation Grant Program. The City of Healdsburg applied to that program and was successful in receiving $1.13 million to develop a plan to take advantage of SMART coming to town. This funding is going to allow for the preparation of a specific plan, and those grants monies are available to us now and need to be expended by June 30th, 2029. At this point in time, we've issued a request for proposals for a consultant team to help the city navigate through this process. Those proposals were promoted on January 6th, and they're due on February 20th of this month. And we anticipate consultant selection by the end of March. The City Council contract award is tentatively scheduled for April 6th. And after that, we'll get underway with the planning effort. In terms of schedule and timeline, this effort is anticipated to take 2 to 3 years. And as I noted, the consultant-led work will begin soon after council authorization. Next slide. So to help you understand a little bit about that planning area and what it looks like, it covers the half-mile radius around the SMART rail station located at the historic depot and extends to the southern terminus of Healdsburg, or the area also known as the South Entry area. To help you a little bit with the northern limit, that's about Piper Street, and would cover the entirety of the downtown commercial district in that area south. So a large area for the city to take a look at. All of that is within a relatively easy bike or walk, and that's part of what helps define that area. Next slide. So why is a specific plan needed? A specific plan is needed to help establish a vision and integrate land use, transportation, and infrastructure planning for the area. It'll establish minimum residential and office densities in the form of general plan and zoning amendments. It'll review parking management and regulations. It'll look at station access and circulation, how we get people to and from the station using any and all modes of transportation. It'll also look at recreation and open space. There's a real opportunity for this community to take advantage of the Russian River. And while we have a lot of development on this side of the river that kind of turn its back to the river, there's an opportunity with over a mile worth of river frontage and the Veterans Memorial Park to look at how we can gain access along the river and to the river as part of this planning effort. In addition to that, we'll also be looking at water, sewer, stormwater, and utility infrastructure, as the area south of the Healdsburg Bridge on the other side of the Russian River has none of these utilities and none of this infrastructure. So this is an opportunity to really look at and plan a significant portion of the city that really hasn't had that in-depth look. There'll also be a programmatic environmental impact report prepared as part of this planning effort. It'll identify impacts. It'll point out any mitigations needed to mitigate those impacts, as well as opportunities to avoid those impacts. The end goal of that programmatic environmental impact report, similar to the CHAP and Sauget Hills and these other area plans, is that if you have a project that's consistent with the city's vision and is consistent with that planning effort, then that development can be streamlined with that without having to go through extensive environmental review. Next slide. Community engagement will be central to the success of this planning process. The role of the community engagement process is going to be to educate and engage stakeholders, including property owners, business owners, community members, local organized groups, seniors, youth, non-English speaking persons, city staff, and elected and appointed officials. The goal is to help ensure an informed decision-making process and ensure plan feasibility. The community engagement approach, that strategy will include several different approaches, such as citywide outreach with a focus on the plan area itself, but also the surrounding neighborhoods. There'll be attendance of staff or consultants meeting with local organizations. There'll be opportunities for one-on-one meetings with special interests, focus groups, community surveys. Staff and consultants will likely attend certain local events to help get the word out and get input, as well as making sure that we're providing information materials in both English and in Spanish. And we're hoping that the consultant team that comes on board will also have other new novel ideas and ways of getting the community involved. Next slide. So in addition to that robust community engagement effort, we're looking at establishing 2 advisory committees. The first is a technical advisory committee. That committee will be responsible for technical review and agency coordination. It'll be comprised of members of different city departments, as well as partner agencies such as SMART, the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, SCTCA, county parks, etc. The goal of that committee is to ensure the technical feasibility of any plan concepts and approaches within the plan. In addition to that, there will be a community advisory committee. That committee's goal or objective will be to ensure that there's community input and feedback throughout the process. That committee will hopefully represent residents, businesses, stakeholders. It'll provide input on key deliverables throughout the process. And it's also important to note that as an advisory committee, its role is just that, it's advisory, but the policy decisions will remain ultimately with the city council at the end of this process. Next slide. So with regard to the Community Advisory Committee, staff is seeking input and direction from the city council, affirming the committee's role and authority. As I noted, that would be advisory. We're looking for input on the size. We'd like to ensure that we have a committee that's large enough for diversity, but also small enough to successfully function. We'd also like some input from the council on what that composition should look like, any ideas that you have on who we should be reaching out to, as well as what that selection and appointment process should look like. This could be an appointment by the city council similar to other bodies with either a subcommittee or the entirety of the council weighing in on a set of applications. This task could be assigned to staff. There could be direct appointments by the city council members themselves, or there could be a combination of any of those approaches. In terms of meeting schedule, those meetings can either be regularly scheduled or they could just be as needed throughout the process. Those are some areas that we'd like some feedback on. In terms of a sunset date, I would imagine that this committee would be formed, but then would also dissolve when the planning process itself is complete and the plan has been adopted. And of course, as with any community committee, this would be subject to the Brown Act and all of its compliance requirements. Next slide. So in terms of next steps, after a discussion with the council this evening, we will return with a resolution establishing the Community Advisory Committee. We will put word out and start trying to drum up interest in participation in that committee itself. We will complete the consultant selection process. And with all of that done, we will initiate the specific plan project itself. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, and we can also go back to the prior slide if that helps the council kind of walk through some direction and decision points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's a lot there before us. So it's nice to start with this thorough overview. Anyone on the council have a question to start with? Councilmember.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few questions. One is on the map, I see that the half-mile radius incorporates a lot of single-family homes. So how would this impact those homes potentially?
Yeah, part of this process is going to really to dive into the TOC policy. But my understanding of it at this point in time, when it's seeking to look at increased densities or meeting that density threshold, that if you have existing single-family residential neighborhoods, those don't count towards those requirements. And so the city could elect to leave those neighborhoods largely subject to similar regulations that are in place. Of course, as you'll know, and you'll hear, I think at the next meeting, some of these state laws are going to naturally kind of allow opportunities for intensification within those neighborhoods, SB 9 and SB 684 and 1123, which allow for some by right development and have essentially gotten rid of single family zoning throughout California. I would imagine, although I don't want to presuppose anything, that we would kind of rely on those laws that are in place and try not to change the character of that area of the city that the city holds dear.
Okay. And also, we are encompassing the South Entry, and the report indicates that the property owners within those areas would likely possibly come forward with some assistance in the funding if we go over the 1.313. Have you had any conversations with those property owners in that area about this issue? Are they involved in this at all yet?
Yes, we have had conversations with the primary landholders down there. Obviously, there's a new entity that owns the Sire Quarry site. They were looking at potentially funding a planning effort for that area when this opportunity came along, which kind of allows the city to take more of the driver's seat, which I think is a good thing for the community. Until we get those proposals in, we don't know what this is going to cost. It could cost less, or it could likely cost more. And we've advised those property owners that if that is the case, that we would like their support in this planning effort to kind of get us over that funding hurdle.
And then beyond that, we need to get utilities and so on out to that area to do anything. Is that something that they would also participate in, I presume, or would the city?
Well, typically future development needs to pay its own way when it comes to development. But at the same time, as I mentioned before, there are going to be more and more grants available, not just for transportation improvements, but also other types of infrastructure improvements. And this would certainly make us, or that area, eligible for those grants. I'm sure they'll be highly competitive, but hopefully through some kind of combination of developer, property owner participation and the potential of grants, that'll help fund that extension of infrastructure to that area. But a big part of this planning effort is going to be an infrastructure plan as well as financing strategy that will kind of point out different mechanisms for funding the necessary infrastructure down there, as well as potential funding sources.
And one last question, speaking of grants, and the 1.13 million includes some federal funding sources per the staff report. Is there any concern about that being an issue at this point, the federal funding?
No, I've checked with the funder. At this point in time, there's no concern with that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. No? Any question? Yeah.
And what role will the Planning Commission have in this process?
That's still to be defined, but obviously they're going to have the first kind of bite at the apple, and they're ultimately the recommending body to the city council. So our plan would be to have workshops with the Planning Commission, ultimately presenting the plan, all the associated policies, the general plan amendments, the land use code updates to them for a recommendation to the city council. So I see them being involved throughout the process and us keeping them informed.
Do you see, similar to, I think, what we did with the last housing committee, having a representative or a liaison from the Planning Commission on this advisory committee as a individual that's named? Would that be a helpful role, or is that something that staff has contemplated at this time?
I've seen that done in many cities, and that's part of the feedback I'd like to get from the council in terms of what type of makeup of that body you would like to see.
For the list of entities for the the Technical Advisory Committee, I saw a list of suggested entities, and I'm curious if that is an exhaustive list, or are you open to adding other agencies like the Air District?
Oh, no, absolutely. We're open to adding additional. That was just kind of a rough first go at it.
Okay.
But any of the regional bodies that are going to have a role in the plan implementation and review of future development, such as the Air District, should certainly be involved. So we'll reach out to them as well.
And then for the funds that this council had previously allocated in the last budget cycle towards the South Entry Area Plan, I think it was $250,000. That number sounds about right. I'm looking at City Manager Kay. Are we allocating those funds in addition to this, or that's kind of being put on the back burner with the plan to exhaust the MTC funds first, and then if we need additional funds, we would use the general fund money?
Yeah, I think you were right with the amount, first off. That's what I remember as well. Those funds were actually put into the long-range planning fund, which, and you're absolutely right, this is one of those needs, the most pressing need that we've been thinking we'll need some funding for. My personal hope at this point is the grant will prove to be sufficient, and we wouldn't need to supplement. If we did, we'd obviously have to have a different conversation about city funds versus property owner funds. That's all subject to the willingness of people to participate. They aren't compelled to. We also own a little bit of land out there. So I think all of that would have to be figured out. For what it's worth, though, my hope would be that those funds could actually stay in the long-range planning fund, because right around the time we finish this effort, we're going to be closing in on the end date of our general plan. So this won't unfortunately be the last of our very expensive long-range planning needs. So I don't think it's a bad thing if we continue to accumulate money in that fund. But options are definitely on the table, and we'll have to see what happens when the bids come back.
Thank you. And then, sorry, my last question. So that South Entry area, that's kind of that triangle shape, the half-mile circumference that we're talking about right now that was depicted in the packet, it includes some of that area, but not all of it. So are we able to look at the areas of the South Entry area that are not within that half-mile radius and do some of the planning work for that conversation about land use that's overdue, or do we have to stay within the half-mile radius?
We do not have to stay within the half-mile radius. The half-mile radius does encompass the entirety of both, or not the entirety, but as long as it touches the parcel, it kind of pulls it in, covers the bulk of both the northern piece and the southern piece of the Sire property. So that's all naturally within that. The South Entry area also has a designation from MTC as being a priority site. And so we were able to include the entirety of the South Entry area as part of this planning effort, because it's part of what's called our priority development area, which is a regional designation. So the planning will cover that entirety.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity for us.
Huge, amazing opportunity. It's really exciting. Thanks.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Yeah, this is a great start on this. And when you're looking at city council direction, I see 8 bullet points, but we were talking about a lot of infrastructure that goes in. Will the consultant look at this in a big picture and give us a proposed schedule, or is that something that staff will work with them to come up with, so that once the consultant's on board, we'll have a rough map of what the schedule of each item needs to be accomplished?
We should have a good look at what that overall infrastructure needs are to extend and serve that area. And based on the land use program that's determined as part of this, make sure that that infrastructure plan is sized appropriately in terms of the size of the sewer mains and the water mains, et cetera. In terms of implementation, obviously, you're going to have to go north to south, because you can't just build it on the southern end without that connection. And so it'll look at some of that phasing and all of that, but it's really going to be more of a bigger picture look at what is the overall infrastructure need, some rough estimate costs of that infrastructure, and a proposed set of mechanisms for funding it.
And that will come before the Community Advisory Committee? Because
No,
I'm-
that's part of this 2 to 3 year planning effort where we'll be diving into all of those issues throughout.
So we'll be looking at what this committee and council comes back with to know that we're appropriately sized on those utilities going forward.
Correct.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, I have a couple questions. The first one comes from a conversation with a constituent, and it's an interesting one. Among the various uses listed for South Entry and related areas, one that's missing is agriculture. Is that something that could be considered in part or in some form for this area?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's a blank slate. You know, the majority of it is currently zoned as industrial, and there's a couple of mixed-use parcels as well. But we fully anticipate that based on the community discussion, as well as feasibility, that, you know, there will be a very different set of proposed land uses there in the future.
Thank you. I'm interested in the relationship between the community group and the technical group. Is one's reporting to the other, presumably the community to the technical group, as sort of a filter for feasibility on certain things, or is it going to be some other back and forth between those two groups?
See them more or less as separate, both kind of focus on different aspects of the planning process. That doesn't mean that the outcome from either wouldn't be available. I anticipate that we'll have whatever meeting notes from either committee available to each respective committee, but also to the public, the planning commission, the council, et cetera, throughout.
Okay, and then finally, are you mostly just looking for direction from the council this evening about the community group composition, how we're going to pull them together and so on? Is that the main
Yes.
focus of our conversation after public comment?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions for public comment? Seeing none, I'll open it up. If you would like to come forward and speak on this topic, please come to the podium. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Harrod, Vice Mayor Edwards, council members, and staff. My name is Sonia Bick-Barwick, and I'm the Engagement Manager at Generation Housing, as well as a long-time Healdsburg resident. We greatly appreciate the city moving forward with the station area-specific plan and the care you're taking in launching this important work. As you begin to review proposals and select a consultant, we encourage you to evaluate your options using two important lenses. The first is fiscal sustainability. Land is scarce, and land use is one of the city's most powerful financial tools. Higher density housing, especially near transit, can generate significantly more revenue per acre, helping support essential services like public safety, parks, and infrastructure. The second lens is inclusion, community health, and equity. For decades, housing in this country was shaped by intentional segregation. A federal program begun in the 1990s recently demonstrated that mixed income neighborhoods with public housing, affordable housing, and market rate housing led to healthier communities, particularly for children. This station area planning process presents a similar opportunity to thoughtfully design inclusive, mixed income neighborhoods near transit, jobs, and services. That history is also why the Community Advisory Committee is so important. This process is exciting, but it can also be nerve-wracking for the community. The decisions you make will have long-term transformational impacts on Healdsburg. Residents should absolutely be included, and we strongly encourage the city to also include nonprofits and local experts. These voices bring in experience and technical expertise that can help ensure equitable and sustainable outcomes. Thank you for your leadership and for taking the necessary steps for a more equitable and healthy future for Healdsburg. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, my name is Kim Lockhart. I'm the owner of River's Edge. I've met you before. I'm here because I have a couple of follow-up questions about this process. I'm next to the Sire property and I was not contacted, and I just wanted to put out there that if I'm a property owner impacted, I was not contacted. And my main question is about how the city of Healdsburg is balancing accuracy on public outreach with, I guess, numbers from SMART. So as I've mentioned before, in the last environmental report from SMART that they approved in December, they did not include any of the river users, 69,000 people who use the river in between Veterans Memorial Beach and River's Edge. So an outreach committee is great, but I don't understand who is responsible for the accuracy about when Healdsburg is accounted for and when they're not. I don't see anyone seeming to really be in charge of that, and it needs to happen because we can't ignore Healdsburg residents in one report and then try and bring them in a different report and act like that's okay. So I'm really hoping that somebody can clarify for me who is ultimately responsible for accounting for who is impacted in Healdsburg and how that number is reached. Thank you.
Welcome.
Hello. I'm David Lawrence, a longtime resident of the area. I'm here to speak in support of your plan and offer a few ideas about it. Over a long career involved in many planning efforts, I've learned a few lessons about ones like this that I'd like to share with you. As I do so, it's worth remembering what General Dwight Eisenhower said about plans. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. The process matters. Yogi Berra, wise as always, observed it's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So what do? Here's what I've learned for what it's worth. First, you have to plan for a range of futures, not just the one you think or wish will happen. A plan that assumes a particular future is almost always wrong. Second, when the signals tell you it's time to adjust your plan, do so. Adapting isn't weakness, though it's difficult politically. It's smart stewardship. Or as the economist John Maynard Keynes once said, when the facts change, so do I. Third, you must stay true to your values, but flexible on tactics. You can't predict everything, but as leaders, you want to respond thoughtfully when you're surprised, as you will be. You have an opportunity to put these ideas into practice now. Nearly 2 years ago, the council voted 3-1 to locate the SMART terminal at the depot site. Conditions have changed, though, dramatically. And good planners and responsible stewards could revisit that decision while there is still time. Consider, you thought Healdsburg would be the last stop for SMART. It's not. There's now funding to go to Lytton Springs, the legal capability to go to Geyserville, and of course, funding search is now underway to go all the way to Cloverdale. You're worried about the downtown site because SMART at the time couldn't guarantee that they would help pay for the infrastructure costs. That's now moot. They can. You didn't know about the high-density housing requirements we just discussed, and the affected community people around those areas have not been included in those discussions. And finally, Enzo Village, Randall, and Mill District developments and residents were not completed when you did that, and no residents were in place. They are now and haven't been heard. In a strong, long-range planning process, we learn and anticipate and change wisely in the face of new realities because the future won't wait for us. It's our responsibility to keep up. Thank you.
Thank you. Next. Welcome.
Evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council. Mark Horn. With respect to the schedule, I note that there's an awful lot that needs to be accomplished, and a 2 to 3 year time frame sounds good. And yet it's also worth noting that In September, SMART hired a joint venture whose schedule is predicated upon beginning revenue service by New Year's Eve of 2028, which is 5 weeks short of 3 years. So I'm hoping we can complete this process before the train comes to town. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hello, Mark McMullen. I'm from Parkland Farms. I think this is just an incredibly generational change that we're about to embark on. I think that this station area plan is going to inform the general plan update. So I think it's very important to, at this juncture, understand that the community has been working on plans for years. We have the Arts and Culture Master Plan, we have the Climate Mobilization Strategy, we have the Active Transportation Plan, we have the DEI Plan, we have all of these plans that we, as community members, have been working on for all this time. And I request that you ask staff to work with the consultant to make sure these plans are integrated into this station area plan. Because I have come to this podium and talked about the fact that there was no funding for the North Healdsburg Avenue project or Grove Street for arts funding, because the planning process is something that happens well before the times that we're able to talk. This is about the planning process. Please, let's take these plans we have all worked on over this time that council has adopted, and let's work forward with this community vision to envision the station area plan with arts and culture, with active transportation, with all of the different things that we have been looking for, the climate mobilization strategy in order to get that last mile from the SMART station to my house in Parkland Farms. Let's look at this. This is the time. This is what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Welcome.
Good evening. My name's Ty Benoit, and I just want to echo a couple of the comments that were made. I just attended the Arts and Culture Master Planning process at the 222, and I agree with Mark that this is very important to pull together the plans that we already have. And then I'd also like to echo what Sonia said from Generation Housing, that nonprofits like Climate Action Healdsburg, that's worked very productively with the city in the past, be involved in some formal way in this process. So thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Welcome.
What she said. Matthew Lopez, hey everyone. I want to echo a few things I heard, which I think are fascinating. I really hope that we get the committee, the advisory committee, really sorted out well, that will get a lot of these things kind of out in the community. Enzo was mentioned earlier, and I was talking to a lot of folks in Enzo back last year on November, and they want to be part of the community. I really hope they get included. And I had a friend that lived up there, and well, they aren't just here to kind of enjoy wine country and just live out some amazing years of their lives. They're here because they want to be part of us and they want to be included, and I hope we do. Similar thing with the Hispanic community. I understand that in the past we've tried to do some outreach and the turnout hasn't been that great because they're often not doing it at times where they're coming right out of work. And so I'm hoping that we kind of find a way to put a lot of this up together in a way that avoids the problem of wouldn't it be nice? And what I mean by that is we talked about where should the station be, whether it's at the downtown depot site, doesn't really matter. The issue that I call wouldn't it be nice is the idea of folks kind of thinking, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we did this and then this and then this and then this. To echo kind of Mark's comments earlier is that we have a lot of plans that we kind of just throw into the air and then don't really look back on ever again. It's the idea of, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had a train station back where the old depot site was? And then now it's there, and now it's less accessible for folks that want to be using it more and would use it more, rather than the folks who use it once to go down to Petaluma or Santa Rosa or San Francisco for a day and then back. That's what I describe the issue of. Wouldn't it be nice? Let's make it more helpful for the ones who want to be part of the community more, and the ones who actively see themselves using these resources and abilities.
Thank you. Next, please. Anybody else? Give it another second here. Okay, thank you everybody for your comments. We'll bring it back to council now and tackle this question of the community committee. And who would like to start this one? Councilmember Kelly.
Mr. Mayor, is it okay? I have a couple follow-up questions just based on what some of the folks said.
Of course, yeah.
So one of the things that was mentioned, and I recall a housing workshop that we attended where it was data around land use and densities was presented in a three-dimensional context for other cities, and it was like a value per acre economic development depiction. And it was really interesting because it used kind of like a heat map where it told the viewer kind of the difference if you look at a massive empty parking lot and a big box store versus a high density downtown block with a bunch of small businesses, and what the actual value to the city, not like how much these people are paying in property tax, but the value to the city in terms of how much they're positively impacting the economic viability of the city. And so that, and I feel like there was an effort like that in a small subsection of Santa Rosa. We were presented with some of that data in the past. So I was curious, is that the type of thing where we could ask to look at value per acre as one of the deliverables from this? So not just what's the difference between ag versus commercial versus another, single family residential in a land use context, but in terms of how the city is looking at our economic future, can we ask for that as a deliverable within this process?
We have outlined in the scope that we'd prefer that the team include an economist to kind of help with those types of questions. And we're hoping also for a consultant team that can help the city and the community and visualize what that future development might look like. So.
Great. Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. I think, sometimes you look at a shopping mall and you're like, ooh, that looks like a great place for people to come and shop. And then you realize that a lot of that land use is actually dead space that's not making, a good economic outcome for the city. So I think that would be wonderful. I think especially with how the community committee is presented with information, because when depicted properly, you can really understand it versus a giant spreadsheet where your eyes just kind of glaze over and you fall asleep. And then in terms of the question about the city plans, what are your thoughts around the climate mobilization strategy, the active transportation plan? Are those things already going to be presented to the consultants for them to review as part of this effort?
Yeah, that's step one. As they work on the existing conditions report, the first thing that we will do is hand all of the currently active plans to the consultants so that they get an understanding of what policies and visions are on the books, and so that they can get to know the community better, but also incorporate that into the planning effort.
Great. And then I think I understood the question from Ms. Lockhart about who's ultimately responsible for the validity of the data within the report. And I think she was talking about the addendum to the EIR that SMART adopted, which is not our EIR. Therefore, we are not responsible for the data. Is it your understanding that where there's going to be a programmatic level EIR as the outcome of this? Yeah, is that what?
There will be a full-blown EIR.
EIR. And that they would go to the Planning Commission and then would come to us, and that we are the entity that is responsible for the validity of that document.
Correct.
Okay, great. Those were, I think, all the questions that popped up that I just wanted to get clarified on. So in terms of the composition, I don't really have a number in mind, but I was thinking like 7 to 9 people so that we could have kind of a variety of a cross section of folks. We always end up with an odd number. I feel like there's never a split vote where you need, the jury to not be tied. But that was the size. And then in terms of the composition, I think in the past we have included representatives from nonprofit organizations like the Chamber of Commerce or Corazon or Generation Housing, where it's a cross section of subject matter expertise as well as representative of members like the Chamber or Corazon, who obviously works with folks within the community. I was also thinking about, because of the comments about affordable housing will be a part of anything that we do in housing affordability, that trying to have a member who has experience living or working with affordable housing, and kind of how that it doesn't just fall out of the sky. And then also having someone, ideally putting a call out or maybe a slot that's like, if we could have a renter represented, because we already know 40% of our community are renters. We don't have a lot of representation of renters in other elected and appointed bodies, and trying to figure out kind of how we meet the need of renters going forward, I think would be helpful. I agree with your point about this sunsets when this process ends. And then I would suggest meeting as needed. I feel like there's nothing worse than like having a meeting schedule and going to a meeting and it's like, oh, there's barely nothing on the agenda. Why are we wasting time? So I think having just to meet when we need folks to come together around a process. And then in terms of the selection, this is a tricky one because I know this is such a big land use planning effort for our city, and I think that can't be understated. I think it was Mark McMullen who said this is really a landmark moment, and it truly is. I feel like this is such an exciting process. This might be our largest grant ever for land use planning efforts, and it's a really huge portion of the entire city. So this is going to be an important effort that will certainly kind of inform the general plan and the next step. So it's really exciting. I don't know what the right way to do the selection process is. Historically, we form a subcommittee and then the subcommittee interviews applicants and then they make a recommendation. I don't know, because we're starting from scratch with this, if it would be that, but having two subcommittees and they make recommendations. But I'm open to it. And ultimately, I know that there would be recommendations that come to the whole council and we can veto on the spot, which is always super awkward and really inappropriate, but we can always do that if need be. So I'm open to what the process could look like. And I think a group interview publicly is always a little bit awkward and probably not the best course of action either. So thanks.
Okay. Who'd like to go next?
I'll go ahead. What have you seen is, I was thinking more around 7 to 11 as far as groups. What size have you found that becomes unruly, and have you found a sweet spot in these types of planning issues?
In terms of finding the sweet spot, that's hard to say. I would say probably in that 7 to, I hesitate to say 15 because that does start to get pretty unwieldy. But certainly in that 7 to 11 size doesn't seem unreasonable. I'd also like to point out that regardless of what the size of the committee ends up being, these will all be public meetings, and we will be strongly encouraging members of the public that maybe didn't get selected or didn't even throw their hat in the ring to be on the committee will hopefully attend and be offering their input and following this process throughout. So that's always the biggest challenge. And what we've always tried to do is, regardless of the committee size, we want the community to be engaged in attending those meetings.
And is it possible to have some of those meetings scheduled throughout the city and possibly even a weekend meeting so that we could have strong participation from the community? Because I know not always the community, people are busy weeknights. They've got kids doing homework, cooking dinner. And so maybe we should have at least a couple of weekend meetings so that the community would have more of an opportunity to participate.
That has been my experience in the past on planning efforts like this, is that we'll usually throw in at least a couple weekend or alternative time type of meetings to try and engage people that aren't, as many people have mentioned, available or interested in participating after a long day's work.
And then I know that I've been doing this for 3 years. You've done this almost a lifetime. Does our staff, and I'm not going to say that I'm an expert at picking who would be good on this. I have general ideas. I think it would be kind of good to have council members pick members, have staff maybe recommend some. I don't know. in the experience, would you be able to provide, or would staff have the ability to kind of pre-screen, look through these and say that, yes, this person's qualified, and the council would be able to look at that general pool? We'd have some type of guidance from staff?
I think that's certainly a possibility. I think in most cases that I've experienced, the council's been presented with a broad group of people and kind of made sure that ultimately whoever was selected reflected a diverse set of backgrounds and interests to help inform that planning effort itself. So,
Bryce, if I could jump in with just a thought on that, I totally agree with what Scott just said. I would just offer that qualified probably isn't a concern or a criterion that's on our minds a lot. As you heard, there will be a technical advisory committee of different organizations with specific expertise. I'm sure we'll get a great consultant. I think the world of our staff internally in terms of expertise. What we're really looking for with this group is what Scott just said, a diversity of perspectives and thought. I think that will make for a better outcome. I think it also, I love all the positivity in the room, and I'm really excited about this process myself. I also realize, though, that when we're talking about future development over a large chunk of the city, not every meeting perhaps will have that same vibe, and sometimes we as a community will disagree about what the outcomes are. And I think giving this committee a chance to do that amicably and cooperatively gives you all a better product. So what ultimately comes back to this room after many meetings and many check-ins is something that's kind of already been through the battles of different aims. So qualified, I guess it just depends what we mean. But I guess what I'm getting at is that I think the city, while we're happy to look at staff playing a role in this or a hybrid approach, I think we have a good perspective as well. I think the city council really is experts in understanding the different corners of the community and different stakeholders. So I think finding some way to bring that perspective in will be helpful as you all help us put together a group that looks like the community. So I hope that's helpful. We're open to different ways in terms of city council, either in committees or individually or as a group putting forth names. We're happy as staff to supplement that or contribute to that process. But I would just kind of keep that big goal in mind of kind of getting a broad spectrum of opinion.
Yeah, my next question was on the actual setting out the interaction between the technical advisory committee and the community advisory committee, because I think understanding how those two committees work together will help us get people on both of those committees who understand what they will be working with, what the task is, and how they'll be going forward. And how will this work, or who goes first, who goes second? Do they kind of parallel track? What is the method of communicating between the technical advisory group and the community advisory group? Is that through council? In other words, we will get presentations and then we will disseminate that out to the true groups, or how do you envision this?
I see both of those groups kind of working in parallel throughout the process, and what they bring to the table will be part of what's presented to the planning commission and to the city council, not necessarily something that's going back and forth through the council itself. That answers your question.
All right, thank you.
So I assume that you'd be working with both of those groups and you'd be kind of a common thread between them, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so let me, to answer the questions that are put to us, I think the size that you're talking about probably more above the 10 mark, because if we're looking at wanting to have residents, property owners, business owners, nonprofits, we need to have a bigger group to incorporate all of those groups into this. So I'm thinking 11 to, I was originally going to say 10, but your point about we don't want to, I don't know, are they going to be voting on things, or is it just going to be all like input from them?
It's
right?
mostly input. I mean, there'll probably, I'm sure, be a lot of straw polls just in terms of kind of to get a sense of what the majority of the committee is thinking. So I don't.
Does it need to be an odd number, I guess, is my question. I think.
Doesn't it just always seems to Be nice to have someone that can break a tie should it,
Should
but
it
it's,
need
but
to-
it's, like you said, this isn't ultimately their advisory, and so it's not gonna make or break it if it's an
Right.
even number either.
The other question that Vice Mayor Edwards had about different times for meetings, if this is a Brown Act committee, it seems like that's a little bit of a barrier to being able to do that. How would we, we'd have to notice it and all of that. Would it be in the chambers? Could it be at the community center? How would that work?
I think given this, they will all have to be noticed, so they'll all follow the Brown Act in that regard. Depending on whatever the size of the committee is, you know, we're gonna have to find locations that accommodate that committee as well as accommodate, hopefully, you know, a good chunk of public that's turning out for those meetings as well. So the community center starts to become a logical location. The library could be a location. We'll have to look at that.
So it's doable, except we can't film from those locations, right?
That becomes the biggest challenge. You know, if you had a group of 7, then in theory, you could have those meetings here and at the dais. And
Right.
they could take advantage of this equipment, but
Okay.
it also doesn't necessarily lend itself to the same type of dialogue and cooperation amongst those that are participating, so.
And as far as how to pick the members, I would like to consider like envisioning your department being kind of like an HR department where you gather together all of the applicants and sort of rate them and present them to the council in a way that is organized that we can choose. And then maybe have each council member choose someone. And then maybe the planning department choose, or the staff choose some members as well. So have it being kind of a cooperative review rather than, I think a subcommittee of the council wouldn't really work well for this because it's a pretty big process. And I wouldn't want just 2 members with that responsibility personally. So anyway, I think something like that might work in the choosing of the group. It'd be diverse, hopefully. And then, yeah, sunset, what else? What are the other? Brown Act, I mean, it has to be a Brown Act compliant committee. So that question's already been answered, right? So that is good and bad. We all know that it's important for everybody to know what's going on, but it's also sometimes difficult to gather people together and whatnot, but that's a moot point at this time. So I think anyway, I think I've answered all the questions that you've asked us to, in my opinions.
Couple questions. So we talked a little bit, but would the meetings be pretty formal, or do you think it'd be more like workshops, interactions? I didn't go to it, but I think, was it the Arts Commission did one at the 222 that sounded like it was more interactive? Like, what are you envisioning for this committee?
Much more workshop and interactive as opposed to formal, for sure.
Okay. And then, yeah, I think it's a couple of thoughts as I'm hearing comments and also from the public. You know, I think it's important to have representation, but I think we need to be focusing on the right person, say like who happens to be a renter, not, you know, oh, let's find a renter and check the box. I think that would be the way that I would approach it. I think it's important to have those perspectives. I also feel generationally, we should try to look toward the next generation for the input, especially if it's related to, you know, property ownership or businesses in town. If there's, you know, the younger generation is coming up behind, I think it'd be nice to look there. We've had some apply for planning commission. I think it's important to have a clear timeline and meeting expectation. I agree with the as needed, but I still think it for the application process, because we formed a number of committees over the time I've been on here. And, you know, we've I don't want to say made mistakes, but there's some where it just kind of kept going. It wasn't clear. And so I think working with the consultants or staff to kind of come up with, like, when we're putting it out there, like, here's kind of the expectation. It's monthly meeting, quarterly, whatever it is, or as needed. And they'll most likely be, in the evenings at this time or the afternoon at this time or something, or maybe there's a set schedule, and they're going to be here in the chambers with an occasional meeting, say at Coyote Sonoma or somewhere within this area. I guess we're in this area, so it fits, but that's where I was kind of thinking, like, not like a field trip, but maybe that's where the workshops can be to, again, gather as much input as possible. I'll make a comment. I've served on the Great Redwood Trail Agency and CRA, and there are a lot of members, and we actually use this chamber, and we'd end up over where Sam and Jeff are sitting and keep working our way around. And I don't remember, but it wasn't like 18. I can look it up in a second and let you know, but it is possible to do that here. And I mean, Melanie and we'd swap out mics and things like that if we had a comment. And then let's see. So I think it's important that, this body is going to be making recommendations and gathering input. And that's really, in my opinion, that's their function, is to gather the information, to bring it to us. And I want to make sure that the committee's recommendations aren't going to just be set aside by the consultant, so that our final, presentation is kind of a sanitized version. I mean, obviously the consultant or staff could have a recommendation, but I think it's important before, if there's a real serious recommendation that comes from the committee, that it doesn't just get set aside before it comes to us. I feel like it's something that, oh, that's a great idea. And if we decide to set aside that recommendation, we're kind of having that discussion as to why. Because we obviously have different perspectives when we're looking at citywide versus if you're zeroed in on something. Okay, so I have my notes on, all right, so the type advisory only, size, I had no more than 7. So, but I'm fine to go more than that, because I can see, like, but I don't think 15, you're getting way too big. So maybe, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm open to it. I want it to be functional. I have a couple names in mind already that I think would be great. I don't know if I should share them yet, but let's see. Brown Act, absolutely. Sunset date, we talked about that. There's a question that came up about the timeline and when the train's supposed to be running. Is that really a big concern for this? Because the train is it's coming, and we're talking about a long discussion on what's going to be growing around it for the next decades coming forward. So I think Mark brought that up about the timing. Is that something that we need to be concerned about, or can this go past when the train gets here?
It can certainly go a little bit past that, and obviously the implementation of the plan is going to go well beyond the start of Smart Rail, and so it's not critical. In some ways, I don't disagree. It'd be nice to be able to kind of, at the same time that this plan is getting adopted, the train service starts, and that hopefully helps kind of provide some of that enthusiasm and interest in its implementation, but it's not critical that it happen at the same time.
That's helpful. That makes sense. Okay. And then the selection appointment process, I'm open to whether, if we each have somebody we really think would be great on there. I do agree it's going to be awkward to be discussing people's appointments, up here, but I'm completely open to it. I think the whole idea is to gather community input. We want a diverse opinion, viewpoint, on this entire process. So I'm open to, suggestions on that. Thank you.
Did you have something you want to add in? No.
Yeah, I just wanted to say really quickly, I think that the concept of what people's expertise is and who is qualified for the committee, the more we've talked about it, the more I realize that, the folks that we're going to be hiring, most likely the consulting firm, they may not be local. They may not even live in Sonoma County. They might be great planners, but be from outside the region. And then same thing with some of the technical experts. If we have people from the regional agencies that are listed, very few of those folks live in Healdsburg or live in northern Sonoma County. So I think the expertise that we're talking about is really people who have lived experience in or working or living in Healdsburg. And that's the expertise that we want, because as you know, like you can plan on paper for a neighborhood, but then unless you live in it and you really know how do people really walk, or what are the routes or the circulation or the types of housing, I mean, that's really the experience and the expertise we're looking for. And I think to Councilmember Hagley's point, this is a long-range planning effort where we're putting words on paper and doing zoning and CEQA, but the reality is this thing's going to get built out over the next, we're seeing what's happening with the CHAP coming to life in the Mill District and around that area, but the CHAP was a long time ago. Well, not decades, but certainly a while ago. And so I think it's the timing of when things start to actually happen. It's many, many years down the road. And so I think in terms of the age diversity of those on the commission or on the advisory committee, it'd be great to have people who have a lot of experience in the community, but also those who are going to get to see this thing come to life in the next generation, and having both of those things represented, and not just people who have a lot of free time on their hands because they are in the later years. So a combination, I think, would be great so that we can ensure that we've got all ages and backgrounds kind of involved in the advising this process.
As I'm thinking about this and other organizations we have, I think the meeting schedule is going to be extremely important, because we want people on this who can commit for the full time. And I think the better we can clarify what that is, someone can say, oh, I can't commit to 2 years, 1 year. If we can, nail that down, that would really help us get not only people who are qualified and have a position, but they can follow it through from the beginning to the end. I would hate for us to get a committee that starts with one group and ends with a completely different set of groups. So I think that if we can get that out there, that we're really looking for people that really, it's not just a fun thing, but it's really dedicated to working for this, because we're looking for long-range planning. So we need a long-range commitment on this. And also, I hope that we can have a little part of that would be a small Brown Act training to go along with that, because it just seems to be getting more and more complicated. Simple words of Brown Act, but to have that people be able to commit to that Brown Act rules and the time schedule, I think are going to be extremely important.
Thanks, everybody. I think we all agree that there's a long list of types of contributors that we'd like to involve, and that's going to inform the size question directly. This can't be a small group. I think 7 is too small. My history with planning groups was with when I was on the Parks Commission, was a very large group that did planning for the Summersall and Badger Park. And I think we started, you can remind me, about like 40 people. And now it might have been easier or more difficult because it was mostly on Zoom at that time because of the pandemic. Hard to say, but that is a huge number. So when I came to this meeting, I was like, oh, that's too much, maybe 20. And now everyone's thinking 20 is a big number, and it is. But still, I think with so many requirements for really broad input here, I would like to see the number to be closer to 15. And I think it's doable. And, also over this period of time, consider that some people will come and go, and there'll be other adjustments as time goes on. But I really don't want to deprive the process of various types of input because of a concern about whether it's going to be unruly or not. And I think this group is going to be in great hands with Scott. And thank you for taking this on. It's going to be huge. And to answer, I think it was David's concern. I assume that really the group will be fed chunks. The agendas will be based on what you think we need to know next, and we'll have to break it down into pieces, and that they'll be able to rely on you and your expertise for the whole process to do that. So it won't be like jumping into just a huge mess of different ideas all at once, right? Yeah. So I'm not too concerned about that. So, but I do feel strongly that the number has to be up there a little bit. And that's going to help us to really democratize the whole process. As far as how we do it, first of all, I think, the city and each one of us really needs to put it out there to the community to jump in and submit an application or what have you. And in my mind, the application should not be detailed. I think probably we're going to want to talk to people at least a little bit. And so we just, want people to step forward and we'll just do the hard work of getting through that list. And so maybe 2 groups, you mentioned 2 groups. I think that's a good idea. And it makes it challenging, when you're trying to put together a committee of this size, but it's going to be challenging for everybody. So just think about Scott, what he's taking on when we have to take on our part of it. It's, it'll be a little messy to have hopefully lots of applications. I mean, I too can think of a lot of great people that I want on this group. And I think all of us probably have a little list running in our head. And so, assuming we come to a conclusion on this at some point here, we'll be on the phone saying, would really like to see you be a part of this. You're perfect for this. And so that's obviously going to be a part of it. So assuming we have, we'll have a lot of applications, and we'll just have to dive into it. That's what I believe. And I don't think that's incongruous with what, the gist of what we're really all agree on, which is that we want to have a really vigorous, broad community input on this plan. So I'm going to bring those ideas back. I think the Brown Act and the sunset date are kind of easy. I think you probably have direction on that. Meeting schedule, probably just gotta have a meeting and find out what people can do and want to do and what you can do. I think that's fairly simple. But the selection, composition, and size, all go hand in hand a little bit. So I'm gonna hopefully I've consolidated the question a little bit and we can start to whittle this down. Go ahead.
I had a question about, since it's an advisory committee, but it's subject to the Brown Act, can they meet on Zoom legally now that there's change? I guess we aren't subject to the new Brown Act rules, but this is an advisory committee, so they potentially could meet on Zoom. As I'm just curious, could they do sometimes in person and sometimes on Zoom, not as a hybrid, but as a way to meet?
They'd be subject to the same rules as the council.
Okay. So they have to publish their location.
Exactly. So even though they're advisory, they're still subject to the Brown Act.
Okay.
So same rules as council.
Okay. I'm based on what you had said previously about the quantity of people, I'm open to the idea. In my mind, it was 9, but I'm open to it being closer to 15. And I think as long as we can meet quorum, I think that's probably the biggest challenge is sometimes when you have bigger groups and people start to feel like, gosh, there's 3 people who just talk the whole time. I never get to say anything. This process is kind of not working for me. I'm just going to stop coming. And so if we lose people's commitment, then we may lose the ability to keep quorum and then they can't function. So that's my only concern, is that if we do have it be larger, we might have to work on how do we make sure everybody's voices are heard so they feel like they're an important part of the process and they got to stick with it. But I'm definitely open to it being more than the 9 I had envisioned originally.
And this group's going to have its own sort of democratic culture, and hopefully they can establish that at the onset so that those concerns aren't too overriding.
I have questions. Yeah, I agree. Initially I'm thinking 7, but not 40.
Yeah.
But yeah, the numbers that have been tossed around, that's fine by me. And I go back and forth in my head where, okay, if we're getting to this bigger number, then all right. And you mentioned there's a couple people that jump to mind. I've got a couple people that jump to mind about, certain connections that I feel like would be valuable community connections to have, there. And so I'm thinking well, maybe then each of us picks somebody. But if say the number's 15 and we each pick somebody, then do you feel there would be a concern that then the people that we had picked, then the others might feel like, I don't want a 2-tiered system. You know what I mean? Oh, well, they're the ones that were selected by council versus everybody selected at once. Because goals to try to get really good input. I don't know. It's just the thought.
I think we're a good example of how we're all equal and we kind of make it work. You know, if we came into this understanding that we're equals, and our positions come in how we run the meetings, but our opinions are all equal. And I don't think that if we appointed somebody that they would have a stronger opinion than anybody else on it. I am concerned about a subcommittee because I look at the subcommittees I've been on, and I think that this is important enough that we need the full council reviewing it. It would be narrowing it down too far when it gets to the council if we did the subcommittees. I think that we'd overlook some people if we did that.
So I have a question. So sorry, I'm like just jumping in. Okay. So I was trying to think like, okay, so if we don't have a subcommittee and we have, say, 40 people apply for 15 spots, and then all right, we come up with our top 20 and then kind of see who, like a straw poll. I don't know. I mean, maybe staff has experience with that. So it's not, here's my list, and then, well, you need to cross out these 2 people because my 2 people are better or whatever. You're like, that's not what we're trying to do here, so I just,
Councilmember Mitchell would like to go next, I think.
Thank you. Yeah. I wonder if you have experience with this and how much could we rely on staff to help with these choices as well? If we had 2 subcommittees, there would be 1 council member who would have nothing to do with any of that. And I find that to be a problem. I don't want to be that one, and nobody else does either. So I think it's kind of that could be a problem as well. But in my mind, I think, yeah, you'd be walking in here and not have any clue what's happening because you haven't been able to talk to anybody. So do you have, or maybe the consultants would have recommendations on how you would choose? If we're doing 15 and we presume maybe could have 5 with the counselor, we could each choose 2 and have 10 and let staff pick 5. I don't know.
I was actually thinking something, just trying to reflect the feedback I'm hearing along those lines. If we were to target 15 as a total number, I agree with what Councilmember Mitchell just said and some others. My hunch is you'll have a pretty large list of applicants, so get ready for that. But we could disseminate all of the applications once they're in to all of you, and council members, using whatever process you see fit, could each put forth, let's say, 2 people, and ask staff to supplement. What we would look to do, I think, is take what all of you put forth and say, well, who's not represented, rather than really so much vetting the individual. Say, is there a part of town that's not represented, or a certain perspective, and package that all up and bring it back to the council, where whether it's council member suggestions or staff suggestions, ultimately it would be up to all of you as a group to vote. But that would ensure that each of you, certainly got to put your stamp on the process. We tried to help balance it out a little bit. If at the end of that process, one of the things that's nice about the flexibility about the size, I think you'd also have if you, at the end of that process saw that some perspective was really missing and we had an applicant, you can tinker with the size a little bit at the end, and I think it still works. But I'm trying to think of a model that kind of reflects as much as possible of what we're hearing, and to me, that might be a way to do it.
Councilmember Kelly.
We just went through a process on one of the agencies that I'm on where we were selecting members of an advisory committee in the same way, and we had like an obscene number of applicants. And so what we did was, at the public meeting, we all got a sheet with the names of we all got a packet of information publicly in advance that had everybody's application in it, just like we do now with all the commissions. And we asked specific questions in it, like, are you a renter? Do you live within this planned area? Or, tell us why you want to be on the committee. So we had enough information to kind of go off of from the application. And then we, in our public meeting, had a list of all the names, and the chair of the meeting said, Bob Smith, and like each council member who wanted Bob Smith said, and we put a tally for Bob. And then we went to, Jennifer Mendoza, and we gave a tally for Jennifer. And we just went down the list, and we at least got like pretty clear. It was pretty obvious. There was a lot of consensus around the very top tier. And then there were like 15 people that got 0 votes. And then we counted those people up, and it was actually like not that complicated because there was a lot of consensus around why certain folks wanted to be on there and whatever. And then there were we picked 17 people and for 15 spots. And then we just talked about the people in the bottom of the list and said, well, we look at this list. We have 15 people who all live in this one area. Why don't we blah, blah, blah. And then it was done. So that was a way we kind of did it in 20 minutes, and everybody was involved, but there were no subcommittees, and we could have public comment. And some of the people came during public comment to say, hey, we've never met. I just moved here last week and I want to be involved in this effort. We were like, ooh, okay. So.
That's a really intriguing idea. Thank you. 20 minutes. Hold you to that? No. But
I'll second the 20 minutes.
yeah, that's I think in that process, what the application is super important. And I think one step before we got there would be to as a council, meet and approve the application and make sure that it's got what we want in it. And that wouldn't be a lengthy conversation. We all sort of have general idea of some of the boxes we want to have on there to check. But I think if we could all agree on that, then that would sort of be a good step forward. Did you have something you wanted to know? Well, go ahead.
Do we want to have, as you said, you had 15, but you got 17 with the 2 alternates? Are we looking at alternates, or are we just looking at letting it attrit if it attrits down?
Let's just start with a big number and kind of roll with it, because like I said, changes will happen, and we may need to reappoint at some point, and I think that'll just happen, and that'll be okay. That's my point of view, but.
So I like what you've suggested. Is that something that we all are kind of getting behind, that idea? It goes around the idea of subcommittees, which I appreciate. And we all can have a say in it and have a conversation about it. But I do agree with you that the real critical piece is the application, right? And what are the questions that we're going to want to know to make that decision about people? So yeah, I think
it objectifies the whole process too.
Yeah.
It makes it easier and less personal, and no one wants to be discussing our friends here. Everybody knows everyone in this town, and anybody who applies is an angel. We are super grateful for anybody who raises their hand, right? So it'll, I think the application takes some of the difficulty out of it. So I'm sensing a consensus on that approach, unless somebody has reservations.
I just wanted to add, or to recircle back on what Councilman Hagley said, is the future generations. So we want to get an application that's going to encourage a wide range of people to apply. I think that's going to be important, without saying specifically we're looking for a youth commissioner or something like that. We just, through the application process, to state that we're looking for a broad age range of participation in this.
I mean, we certainly could ask their age, and then we could also ask a question like, where do you see yourself living in 20 years? And if they're like at the historic cemetery, that's one answer. Or like on Grant Street, that's another answer.
Okay. Okay. I think that the 15 number is not creating a lot of friction here. But I want to double check that with everybody.
Also, there's an option, like if we get to the list and there's 17 people that we all are like, couldn't we just change it and make it 17? Like,
or if there's only 11.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think that kind of does the list. Do you feel like you need more direction from us at this point?
No, I feel like we have plenty. And I also just want to note that this conversation, I think, really helps reflect the magnitude of this process, the importance and the opportunity that's really before this city. So I really appreciate you diving into this. There's a lot to come. It is a little bit daunting, I will admit, but it's a great opportunity for this community to look at its future. So thank you.
All right. Thank you. It's a great conversation. So moving on to new business, item 9A. Low carbon fuel standard program updates with utility conservation analyst Tara Sampson. Welcome, Tara. was cool.
Okay, are you ready for me? Perfect. Hello, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for having me here tonight to discuss low carbon fuel standard program updates. Next slide. The recommended actions for this evening is to 1, adopt a resolution adopting a definition of low income for the purposes of usage of funds received through the state low carbon fuel standard program and authorizing updates to programs funded by funds received through the state low carbon fuel standard LCFS program for transportation electrification, and 2, to also provide direction to staff on use of one-time additional low carbon fuel standard funds. Next slide. But before jumping into tonight's discussion, I wanted to provide some information about our primary energy program funding sources. We mainly use cap and invest proceed funds for our energy and greenhouse gas GHG reduction programs. These are funded by our freely allocated allowances from California's cap and invest program, which has the requirement to be used to benefit electric ratepayers and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So that's cap and invest, previously known as cap and trade. Healdsburg also participates in the state's low carbon fuel standards program, which had some regulatory updates last year and is the main topic for discussion this evening. LCFS provides credits for estimated GHG reductions from residential EV charging and from public charging. The value of the credits must be used to support transportation electrification and predominantly for the primary benefit of low-income individuals and communities. Next slide. We fund a great deal of our programs with the cap and invest proceeds, which you can see in the list here. We will be focusing on LCFS, low carbon fuel standards, tonight, and I will not be presenting on any of these other cap and invest programs. The 2 current programs funded by LCFS right now are the 50% discount for care customers on the hourly user fees at the city-owned public EV chargers and the home EV charger rebate for care customers. The best place to find more information about any of these programs, though, is at smartlivinghealdsburg.org. Next slide. So let's jump into LCFS. LCFS is one of our strictest energy program funding sources. It can only be used for transportation electrification and predominantly for the primary benefit of low-income individuals and communities. In the equity requirements section, the governing regulation does allow for a definition of low income established by a publicly owned utilities governing body, City Council. And adopting a local low income definition for purposes of LCFS creates more local flexibility and opportunity to benefit low income residents in Healdsburg as compared to the standard definitions in the regulation, and allows us to expand our transportation electrification programs that could be funded by these LCFS funds. So adopting a local low income definition is part of tonight's resolution. Next slide, please. Typically, we earn LCFS credits based on our reported amount of usage at the city-owned chargers, as well as a state estimation of the amount of home residential charging. At the current credit sale rate of approximately $60 per credit, our ongoing LCFS earned credits would generate approximately $100,000 annually per year. Due to a provision in the updated regulation and updates to one of the statewide programs, we were also recently allocated $883,333. This is one-time funding that must be spent in accordance with the LCFS regulation, and that I would not expect to have happen again. To better leverage the LCFS ongoing funds for existing programs, staff are recommending some minor updates to existing transportation electrification programs, which I'll discuss next. And then the main discussion topic for tonight are additional options for the one-time LCFS funds that council would like staff to investigate further. Next slide. So this is a bit of a busy slide, but I'll walk through it here. So let's start with the updates to existing programs. First, the 50% discount on user fees at city-owned EV chargers for low-income residents, which staff are recommending expanding the program to include promotional offers and referral incentives to help increase participation in the discount program, such as first month free promotional offers. And that's with the low carbon fuel standards credit or credit funds. There are affordable user fees at the city-owned stations for all EV drivers, which are supported by the Cap and Invest funds. Second, Healdsburg also offers a home EV charger and associated panel upgrade rebate for low-income residents that have an EV and enroll their rebated charger in the Home Energy Load Management Program. And no changes are recommended at this time. And the related Home Energy Load Management Program is supported by Cap and Invest funds. Healdsburg also currently offers a commercial and multifamily EV charger rebate to encourage daytime charging behaviors and to help make charging more accessible. And currently the rebate is specifically for level 2 chargers, and staff are recommending opening up the rebate eligibility to also include level 3 chargers. Chargers that meet the low income definition could utilize LCFS funds, and other rebated projects could utilize the Cap and Invest funds. Lastly here, Healdsburg also currently offers an e-bike rebate with varying amounts based on income, and the current low income rebate is $700, and staff recommends increasing that to $1,000. These existing programs are anticipated to align with the potential annual revenue from the sale of the LCFS credits, assuming high participation rates. And authorizing the changes to existing transportation electrification programs is part of tonight's resolution. Next slide, please. Now moving into additional options for transportation electrification programs. Here's the list of allowable equity projects. I've summarized them in my own words here. However, the allowable equity projects are very specific, and I will encourage us to refer to Appendix C tonight for exactly what is allowed in the regulation. But in my words, the allowable equity projects include medium and heavy duty EVs, public and multifamily EV chargers, electric mobility solutions, rebates and incentives for EVs, home EV chargers, and offsetting charging costs, charging equipment for public transit and clean mobility, workforce development for related projects, and grid-side distribution infrastructure to support medium and heavy-duty projects, as well as other projects, but that are subject to an approval process by the State Air Resources Board. And these options for new or expanded transportation electrification programs could be funded by the one-time additional LCFS funds or our unsold LCFS credits. Next slide. So I'll discuss a couple options for consideration. With the federal tax credits for new and used EVs having ended, the staff recommends considering a rebate for EV purchases for Healdsburg low-income individuals. And examples of other EV purchase rebate programs for income qualified customers are provided here. For example, PG&E has a pre-owned electric vehicle rebate for up to $4,000 for income qualified customers. And since Healdsburg does not currently offer this type of rebate, that means that a low-income household in other cities in Sonoma County could get $4,000 back when they buy a used EV, but currently not a low-income household in Healdsburg. Next slide. So if developed, staff recommends keeping the rebate flexible to allow for maximum participation by low-income residents, and shown here is a list of questions for council consideration. Starting with, does the city wish to explore an EV rebate for low-income residents? And if so, should the city consider a rebate amount of $4,000 to match the PG&E rebate, or consider a larger amount or a lower amount? Consider a maximum allocation towards this program for launching the program and evaluating prior to allocating further funds. Consider providing the total rebate amount once the rebate application is approved, or splitting up the rebate amount over 2 or more years. Consider the rebate offering only for pre-owned EVs or also including new EVs as eligible, and considering a maximum rebate per electric account or household, such as no more than 1 per household. We'll move to the next slide. So another option for council consideration is there are city-owned public chargers are currently located at City Hall, Branch Lane, the Senior Center, and the Mayher parking lot, the dark blue dots on this image. And the climate mobilization strategy also identifies the community center, Georgie Rec Park, the high school tennis courts, and West Plaza parking lot, the light blue dots on the chart here, as potential public EV charger locations. Civil engineering design drawings have already been drafted for the community center, Georgie Park, and the high school tennis courts. So staff recommends using LCFS funds as available to fund projects that meet the low income definition, and using cap and invest funds to fund other public charging projects. And again, shown here is a list of questions for council consideration if interested in Healdsburg installing additional city-owned public chargers. For example, which sites would council like to prioritize first? Are there any other high priority equity locations that council would like staff to investigate? And a public charger installation for 4 to 6 level 2 charging ports, like the ones that we recently installed at Senior Center and Mayher parking lot, is typically estimated to cost up to $250,000 per site. Is this roughly the amount and type of public chargers for which council would like staff to continue planning, or consider other types of chargers that could be investigated, such as solar only powered, vehicle to grid enabled, fast chargers, or other? And the EV charger installation projects and construction contracts would be brought to council as they are developed and the CIP projects developed for those. Next slide, please. So if the resolution is adopted, the next steps are to implement updates to the existing transportation electrification programs, develop the CIP projects for additional public charger installations, and further investigate other transportation electrification program options for the LCFS funds. And we are hoping to receive further guidance on the recent regulation updates from the California Air Resources Board, and we will and staff will be meeting with other small publicly owned utilities that also received this one-time additional funding. Next slide. So a reminder of the recommended action for this evening. And I can take questions and comments.
Thank you. That was a lot. Appreciate it. Questions? Yeah, go ahead.
I kind of mentioned this to Stephen a little bit ago. So on the income restricted units that are coming online, if they have charging areas for their residents, are the residents paying for that, or is the city running those chargers, or is it, say, Freebird or Luther Burbank? Are they running those chargers and then having a specific program for their residents? Like, how does that work? If we're being asked to, support, hey, let's get more electrification at the income restricted units.
So given the current programs, we would very likely rebate the chargers, but it would be the developer in charge of installing them. And the way the program is set up currently for the commercial and multifamily EV charger rebate is that it's either adding EV chargers to an existing building or exceeding code for new construction, since there are already a minimum number of chargers that a new developer would be required to install. We typically rebate exceeding code. So we could rebate any additional chargers they choose to install that exceed code, but really the ownership and operation of them is on the developer, whether they do that or hire a third party.
So I guess, so that's related to the infrastructure piece, the actual charger units. But I'm saying like the resident, when they go in, so we do a rebate program, they can buy a used car. All right, I want to charge it. Are they being charged for charging? And if so, is that something that is run through an app or something that we use, or Freebird or Luther Burbank has their own rate that they charge to plug into that charger, but they have to follow certain guidelines based on if they're a care customer or not? Does that make sense?
It would be set by the owner of the chargers. We typically have not dictated to folks what they would charge for their charging. So it'd be up to the owner of what is a reasonable cost to recuperate the electric costs from folks using their charger.
And I feel like there's probably not a ton of data on that yet. We're kind of at the forefront of that, but it was just a thought that came up. Okay, that was it for questions.
Previously, I remember when Liz citrine apartments were built, and I'm guessing that standards changed because I think those were built in like 2018 or 2020, but they were required to bring the electricity to the curb, but they weren't required to install chargers, and there were no chargers installed. What is the current requirement for affordable housing development now?
Yeah, so that is part of the Cal Green Building Code, and I defer to our building department because they would be the ones reviewing those permits. But again, the rebate is for exceeding it. So if they were now interested in installing chargers, it would be for that cost of installing the charger itself. They've already paid for the code requirements to bring electricity to the space. But could I just, looks like David Wilby is not here. He'd be the best to answer specifically. I can also follow up with him and send you the code language. It depends on the amount of parking spaces, and it's a percentage of the parking spaces.
Okay, is it your understanding generally that developers are required to install chargers to some standard at this point? So for 155 Dry Creek Road or the Burbank apartments that are in North Village, are they required to install a charging unit that people can plug into?
To my memory, yes, there is new California building code standards that just went into effect January 1st, 2026. So I'd be happy to look those up and provide you more information, but it is typically a mix of a certain amount of EV chargers need to be actually installed, a certain amount of spaces need to be at least EV ready, with the electrical infrastructure brought to the parking spaces and ready for a future charger. But
okay, I feel like it would be really helpful to know what that is and if any of those buildings are required to follow it, since they probably pulled permits before that new Cal Green was adopted, so they might not be subject to it. But you don't have to answer that right now. I just think that would be helpful information that we don't have right now. One of the slides you had said grid side distribution infrastructure to support medium and heavy duty EV charging. I'm sorry, but what does that mean?
Yes, so that's how it's stated in the regulation. And that would be things like updating transformers that serve the charging station if it's going to need an updated transformer in order to supply that amount of electricity. That would be an example of like the grid side infrastructure, as compared to the chargers themselves, kind of that grid side, transformers, feeder lines, that side of the charger.
Okay, so for the grid side infrastructure, in this context, would those dollars go towards the city's ability for our own publicly owned utility to upgrade our grid infrastructure? Or would that be a benefit for a developer who is required to put in those transformer upgrades, for example, and they'd be on the hook for paying for those transformers, so we would be providing them a credit so they don't have to pay? Or this is to benefit the city for infrastructure we would have to pay for? Or it depends on, like, if it's the community center, then we are the developer because we own the land.
Yeah, so these are all ones that we can investigate further. That grid, that one in particular, investments in grid side distribution infrastructure, is from the recent updates to the LCFS regulation, and I'm hoping that CARB will issue updated guidance documents that discuss more of what they are looking at there. However, it is I'll maybe let others speak to this part more so of who is typically responsible for those. But say, for example, there's a location that would be really good for medium heavy duty charging, and either the city wants to put it in or a developer wants to put it in. We could use the low carbon fuel standards credits to cover that grid infrastructure that needs updated.
So like medium heavy duty, meaning like F-250s or other types of trucks or equipment that, such as electric forklifts or things that maybe a commercial operator would have, or say the fire department, or if we're requiring our fleet to be electrified, that would qualify?
Yes, so like bigger trucks, buses, types of vehicles.
Okay, super helpful. And then for the electric vehicle rebate that you talked about, like what PG&E is offering up to $4,000 per vehicle, how does that work for someone who's leasing the vehicle if they're not buying it outright? Since most low-income people are not buying cars outright because they don't have, $20,000 sitting in their savings account to go out and buy this car. How does it work for a lease?
Yeah. Each rebate program is a bit different on how they deal with that. Some say either owned or leased. It's the same. You still get the rebate. Some limit it. My recommendation would be that we allow for owned or leasing to qualify for the rebate, but that is something that certain programs stipulate whether or not that qualifies.
And then last question. So for fast charging, is fast charging and level 3 charging the same thing?
I use them interchangeably.
Okay, great. Do we have any level 3 chargers in the city?
Not that the city owns. However, the Electrify America would be considered fast chargers. And I do believe one of the gas stations also has some fast chargers. So they are in the city, but they are not city owned.
And Tara, can you, for my sake, if not others, can you clarify Electrify America is at the Safeway location?
Yes, apologies for not specifying. So the Electrify America chargers at Safeway are considered fast chargers. And then I do believe one of the gas stations also has fast chargers.
Okay. And then the map that you showed of the charging, those are the ones that are just the city-owned sites that were depicted. Is that right? So there could be other chargers available, say like a church had chargers in their parking lot. I'm making this up because I don't know of any churches that have chargers in their parking lot, but there could be some in other parts of the city. But looking at that map, it looks like they're all pretty concentrated around where we are right now, or the plaza. Is that right?
The dark blue and the light blue dots were the ones I had added for city-owned chargers. It was faint, but in the background, there were some of the other privately owned chargers. I took that map as a screenshot from a recent countywide project. So they did capture a good amount of the private chargers as well. They were just fainter dots. I was really highlighting the city-owned chargers in that map.
The other one's green? I'm looking at the slide on here.
Yes, I believe green and red. And I don't know if...
Do you know the difference between green and red on that map?
I would need to look at the legend again.
Okay.
It was provided by the county.
Got it. We don't have a legend
Maps coming up here.
on that, so that would be helpful too. but I could probably look at Safeway and then try to extrapolate from there what's what. But okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Edwards?
Yeah, when we're talking low income, are we talking 80% AMI and down, or where is the starting point for this low income?
So part of tonight's resolution is to adopt the local definition of low income, which, yes, it is the definition, the way it is written, is the qualifying for the electric care program, which is 80% of AMI or below. The definition goes into a couple other options for low income individuals and low income communities, again, to give us more flexibility in spending this low carbon fuel standards funding to ensure that it does benefit Healdsburg low income residents, because the standard definitions within the regulation really limit our spending of those low carbon fuel standard funds.
Okay, and now the review of us period of time. On these programs that we have, can I get a rundown on how efficient these are, or how well used are they? In other words, how many EV bicycle rebates have we done? How many are these programs being used now? And are we trying to add more to programs that aren't being used, or if there's some definition of the discount? In other words, it says we have 50% discounts up to 20,000 anticipated. Do we know how much of that we spent? On each of these, it would be I hate to throw all this out, but for me to know where we need to go, I need to know if things are being used. In other words, we could sit up here and add programs that aren't being used. So I'd like us to have that data so we could know what's actually being used.
Sure. So the existing programs do have fairly low participation. Again, those are existing programs. We can only use this money for transportation electrification that primarily benefits low income, which is also why I was recommending considering an EV purchase rebate to help increase the participation in these other programs that support EV charging for our low income residents. But I do have some 2025 statistics for you. So the 50% discount on charging at the city-owned public chargers currently only has 5 participants. That is part of why there's the recommendation to expand for referral and promotional offers to increase participation, but again, also relies on a low-income customer owning, leasing, or using an EV. Again, why I'm recommending for consideration a EV purchase rebate. That did have also a low dollar amount in 2025, around $400 total. So up to 20,000 would be a very high participation, again, assuming that more low-income residents are able to purchase EVs and that we're able to generate some more interest in that charging discount. The home EV charger, as I said, has low participation. There are 2 participants that have installed EV chargers and panel upgrades, and they are working on their rebate applications right now. And the e-bike rebate had 13 total rebates last year. That has somewhat plateaued. We've been offering it since 2020, and it's limited to 1 per household for the lifetime of that customer. So it had really high interest initially. I think the folks that were interested have already purchased their e-bikes. And of that 13 total this past year, 4 were care customers. So actually a pretty high percentage of care participation, even though the overall was relatively low compared to previous years.
Okay, now I'm thinking that an impediment might be if I am a renter, low income, could I work with my landlord to say, hey, I want to get this EV, the city's offering this program. Would the tenant qualify for the low income for the upgrade of the panel and the charger, or would that be looked at the landlord's income situation to where they might not be low income?
So the way that rebate application is worded right now, it would allow as long as as long as someone who qualifies for the care program is living in the home, the rebate could go to the landlord to make that upgrade for their tenant.
And then could somebody stack these of saying they got an EV car, they got an EV bike and added a charger? I'm just trying to find ways that we can encourage people to take advantage of this money that is sitting there that we're trying to get people to utilize.
Yes, they could definitely stack.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Thank you. Yeah, I have a few questions. Yeah, it's disappointing in the usage of these opportunities, right? And we've now amassed $300,000 in the bank because people aren't using these credits. Is that my understanding?
If we sold all of the credits that we've earned, it would be approximately $300,000.
Okay. And so, I mean, I appreciate your thoughts on trying to increase participation. But do we really know, I mean, do we know why why people aren't doing it? Maybe the best thing would be to jump down to the rebate on the cars so that they can get the cars and then they'll need all this other stuff. So, I mean, maybe that's where the emphasis needs to be. The e-bikes, it sounds like that has dropped off. The home EV chargers, people aren't using that. It's disappointing. And will a month free up front, like you're suggesting, we don't really know whether that's going to work or not, right?
It could catch their attention. I also did not emphasize before, both of those programs, the 50% charging discount and the home EV charger, are only about a year old. So we've only started offering them relatively recently. But I do think one of the main questions up for council consideration tonight is would you like to consider an EV purchase rebate for our low-income residents?
Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a kind of an innovative concept and I like it. The other thing that I wanted to ask about is the one-time money that we've got sitting out there for $883,333, I think you said. Are you suggesting using that for any of these other projects, or I'm not sure where your recommendation is on use of those funds?
Sure. Thank you for the clarifying question. So the 4 existing programs I outlined, those I think we could very easily cover those existing programs through our ongoing low carbon fuel standards funding. The question I would pose is with this one-time funding, the $333,000, what other programs would you like staff to investigate, such as additional public EV charger installations, developing an EV charger purchase rebate, or if those are the 2 that I presented some questions to consider, or if there's something else on that allowable equity list that you'd like for us to investigate further.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have question-wise.
Any other questions right now? I just have a couple, and then we'll put it up for a public comment here. Are there any concerns about a refund program for new EV cars in terms of it being used by residents and staying in Healdsburg and making sure that that these vehicles become part of our local ecology, so to speak?
So the other rebate examples that I looked at do provide the full rebate amount at the time that the application is approved. If City Council is not comfortable with that because you want some more assurance that the vehicle is staying in Healdsburg, the rebate could be split over 2 years or more, where a portion is provided upfront, another portion is provided upon submitting the updated vehicle registration with the DMV. That is an option. It has more administrative work associated with it, and it does have the customer wait to get their full rebate amount, but it provides a little bit more assurance that the vehicle stays in Healdsburg.
Do you know of other communities that do it that way?
I do not.
Okay. And then if we use some of the 883,000 for public charging stations, how do we verify and report that they're being used by low-income folks?
So they would qualify as an equity project if they're located in one of the locations that we've determined is something that the council has adopted in their definition of low income. So we'd be allowed to use the funds based on its location. In terms of reporting if it is in fact getting used or not, I would be able to look at the folks that are enrolled in that 50% discount and see which chargers they are using the most often.
Interesting. Okay, I'd like to
One last.
Go ahead.
I'm guessing that when we're talking about residents, that would be the overall umbrella is on the care program. So that would, you couldn't just have a PO box that you live here and say that you'd actually have to have a utility bill and somehow prove that you reside at that location, or does it only go to the person who's on the care on the bill or is that what council would decide?
It is, I would say it is someone who resides in a household that qualifies for care.
Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Mitchell.
So if we were to put like an EV charger charging station at the community center, would that qualify, one? And two, would we be required to monitor who's using those? Or is it just proximity to a low-income area?
If the local low income definition is adopted by council tonight, yes, it would qualify as an equity project. And that is the requirement for using the low carbon fuel standards funds. Monitoring would purely be for our own information.
Not required. Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So in Councilmember Mitchell's question, if we installed a charging station at the community center and that would qualify based on the recommended language, and then on top of it, if a care customer charged at that city-owned site, they would get the 50% off discount at it?
Correct.
But anybody else could charge there at the regular rate?
Yes.
Like at City Hall? Great.
Do you have something?
I'm sorry to ask this question, but if you are in a low-income apartment, does the electric bill come to you or is that part of your rent?
The different multifamily sites are set up differently. It really depends on the specific site. I would say in my opinion, most the tenant is the tenant is the account holder, but we do have a couple examples where the facility has a master meter, so just the one for the whole building. That is something that's accounted for in the low income definition, that you either receive the care discount or you would otherwise qualify, but because of how your account is set up, you are not the account holder.
Thanks for saying that.
Okay, I'd like to open up to public comment now. Does anybody want to come forward with comment on this item? Thank you. Welcome.
So just listening to it, and I know a couple of you guys are electric vehicle owners, and I'm somewhat of a geek about it. I know you're a geek about it. When I first looked about getting an electric vehicle years ago, of course, the environment first came to my wife and I's mind. It would be better for the environment if we drove electric vehicles, but it's complicated. You know, at that time, we didn't have a charger and that kind of thing. There were kind of two reasons that we got an electric vehicle. The first one was the cost of putting in the charger. Would it help us? Would we save money? And in fact, you really do. The other thing that came along is at that time, there was a rebate I can't remember how it worked. It was a small rebate on our power bill from the city of Healdsburg, which has since gone away, which is fine because it wasn't a huge amount of money. But I'm kind of thinking that maybe if the intent of this is to affect low income residents and we really want to get them driving electric vehicles, you kind of have to do both. I think you have to offer up at some of the low income existing residents, like the Randall or whatever, I don't know what's over there, chargers, and you have to offer up a rebate for the vehicle. I don't think that it has to be as grandiose. I don't know if you said 9,000, that's a big amount of money, but maybe somewhere in the middle. So you kind of do both, because I think the buzz will come up in the low income residents. Hey, if we had an electric vehicle, we would get free charging if you could work it. And I don't know how the structure of the system at, for instance, the Randall is, if you can tie in that way. Anyways, that's just my thought. I think it takes two things to get people into it. And definitely for the low income folks, I think they're going to be looking at the value out of it. And I think it's going to be both of those. Anyhow, just my thought.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, close public comment on that item and bring it back. Councilmember Higley.
Yeah, he's right. I've kind of geeked out on this since I got my electric vehicle, and what you learn as you're looking for places to charge. I remember talking to Councilmember Kelly, trying to get some advice. Yeah. But at the end of the day, this is really about affordability and not just income wise, but in terms of long term, and the cost to operate an electric vehicle is substantially less. And to your point, we need to be able to help people buy the cars. I'm really happy it's, looking at used EVs. Mine is 6 years old now. I was talking to an audience member that bought one that was a 2018 model EV. And I think that's where the real value is, because the depreciation has already been taken. So I think there's two things. So used vehicle rebate, I would support that. I think we would need to have a maximum allowance, and maybe, to the point of like how many people are using them. We should start with a pilot program with a cap. And if it's successful, we can revisit and reallocate funds. And as I was looking through this, I recalled during the drought when we offered a free water delivery program, and we were overwhelmed with the success. And so I think that's where, if we do like a pilot program, like allocate whatever the amount is, I think we start with that just to see. We're at the infancy of this. So, that's why I asked the question about the affordable housing. If the Randall doesn't even have chargers, then they should have chargers so that the tenants can charge there. The second important thing is, I know that at my work, there's some chargers, and there are people that work in my office that don't have chargers at the apartments that they live in. So they, when there's a company email like, hey, I'm charged in, I'll be done at 1:30 if anybody wants, so that you have that kind of goes around to, and people look to be able to charge, and these are the level 2 chargers, so they're not quite as fast, but if you're sitting at work all day, half a day, you get a decent charge back. So you've got that aspect of it. So I think it's really important to get people in the vehicles. I like the recommendation that there's no requirement on decommissioning of a car, because you never know. It's like you have a kid, like they need a car. There you go. We're trying to help people transition away from the gas to the more economical EVs. And let's see. So that's my comment. I think a couple things I would add is we also need to start a program for non-low income when it comes to infrastructure and home charging. Because it is a cost, like you talked about, like you get a car, and if we're really trying to move the needle to try to get people to swap out their cars, there's a barrier to entry when people go to their panel and find out they have to add a sub panel, and next thing you know, it's a $10,000 transition, which doesn't apply just to cars. But if we've talked through the climate mobilization strategy about electric everything, all the utilities. And if you've already got a hot tub plugged into this and this, you don't have room in your panel, and that's a big expense. So I think I would completely be open to using some of the proceeds, if we can, to have a rebate program or something to help encourage the upgrading of the infrastructure at single family residences in town that might not be the low income. Maybe, I don't know, 160% or 180% AMI, whatever it is. But the more of those that we can get swapped out, and also rebates for the chargers, getting those installed, I think that helps the transition over quite a bit. And then finally, there was a question about the city-owned EV charging lots. I think we need some superchargers somewhere in town, which are very quick. When I was in Sacramento, I think I added about 150 miles in range in about 17 minutes. And it cost me about $20, I think. It wasn't a whole lot. And that's paying, I think, 47 cents. I mean, you can tell I'm like geeked out on this. 47 cents a kilowatt, which is high. That's higher than what we would pay at home. So when you're looking at adding that much range for $20, it's not that big of a deal. We need to have those here in town. And then I think, great location for additional chargers across from Cousteau's, that city-owned parking lot. Community center, absolutely. I think that's a great spot, especially with activities. Georgie Park, yes. Rec Park, no. I've seen too many foul balls fly over the fence there. So if we're going to consider there, I would put them up by Georgie Park, keep them away from Rec Park. That would be a bad situation. And the others, at the golf course, maybe the villa. And I think we should also look at the high school and maybe they just redid their parking lot. It would have been nice if they added some charging stations there, because there are a lot of, there are?
Well, no, that was a suggestion.
Oh, okay. Okay. So that's kind of where I go, is we're looking not necessarily today, but maybe 3-4 years from now, as more people are getting secondhand EVs, being able to charge at school would be a great option. So those are kind of my thoughts. I think I covered everything. Yeah, I think we do need to add some level 3 chargers. The one thing I'll say is, when we're thinking about this at the parks, I think we're looking more at like top off, where you're going to your kid's game or you're going on a hike up at the villa, it's an hour or two, whatever. That's a good chunk to kind of top off your car a little bit. And I think that's where you kind of look at these versus the overnight. All right, I need to go from 10%, 20% to 80, 90%, where you need the longer time. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I would have a question. You were talking about adding some EV monies for single family housing, not necessarily low income, but we cannot use these funds for that. Is that correct?
It would not meet the equity requirements. I can certainly investigate where else that could come from if there's strong council desire for that.
Because I'm sorry, yeah, there are other funds, cap and invest funds that we get as well.
I'd need to invest if it matches any of our other sources.
Okay. I really do think that the one-time funds of the 800 and something thousand would be wise for us to do EV charging stations, use that for them. It's in our climate mobilization strategy to do that. We could meet that. I think it would be a really good use of those funds. And certainly the community center would be my top choice. You said, I know Georgie Park is on there. Does it qualify? And if so, how?
Yeah, so it's included in the local definition, be community gathering spaces like the community center or public parks. So it'd fall in the definition that way.
The other one I would think a second choice would be the high school by the tennis courts. I think that would be get a lot of use. But so, yeah, I think, depending on how far that money would go, if it's $250,000 to do a set of 4, yeah.
Yeah, per site.
And would we do like 4 at the community center, or would we want to do 8? I mean, how do we decide these things?
Yeah, that's up to council direction a bit. The draft engineering drawings right now for the council or for the community center are for 6 level 2 chargers.
One thing I'll add on that is we'd also want to lean pretty heavily on community center staff who, see the parking out there every day and can just help us balance. We want these to be used. We also want people to be able to park, and it does cause a net loss in parking spaces. So we don't, have a rock solid number right now, but we'd look to
We could,
put a plan together.
I think that makes sense, because the ones that are over by, the Matheson, what's that parking lot right there? That we just.
Mater Gallery.
Mater Gallery, yeah. They're mostly empty every time I've ever gone in there to try to park, and everything else is full. So I think that's a consideration too when we're choosing a site. But I really would like to see that money, one-time money used for this long-term asset. I mean, I think it would be a really good opportunity for us to do that. I also, as I said, I like the potential rebates for cars. It sounds to me like the used EV is probably a better choice than the new. And just from a cost perspective, I would guess that used are a lot cheaper. And so that if it's say $4,000, that's sort of the number I landed on, would be significant and whatnot. Also, I'd hate to see it not, I wouldn't want to see all the administrative work go along with, I'm going to give it to you over 2 years and I want to make sure you're really registered in Healdsburg, all that. It's like, just do it, right? And we're getting someone to drive an EV, right? I guess that's the whole point of this, right? The climate too. So I would support that. I would think too, though, that we've got $300,000 sort of sitting around and we're generating about $100,000 a year. That those could be done out of those funds as like a pilot program, which I think Councilmember Hagley suggested. I like that idea to see. Because the other ones, we're not getting a lot of bang for our buck. The money's just piling up in our savings account. So let's see how it works and how it needs to be tweaked. That would be what I'd like to propose we do with those funds.
Thank you.
So for some of the park sites, and I see we don't have staff here that maybe can answer this, but maybe Chief, we close the parks at night, like the skate park parking lot and Badger Park. Are those typically, we lock those gates at the entrances to the parks, or we leave them open?
The parking lots are left open. The gates are not locked anymore.
Oh, okay, great. I was thinking about having more geographic diversity, just because things are generally more clustered towards downtown right now. I second or third the idea of the community center site, and definitely think that could help a variety of different users who are coming to the community center, and agree that Georgie Park, given all the different uses for Georgie and it being so close to the neighborhood there's like a lot of good uses. And I was thinking also about maybe Badger Park, since we're already doing a renovation there. I don't know the timing of that project, and if putting in charging infrastructure there would work in terms of this timeline and that timeline, but just because there's affordable senior apartments that are right next door at Fitch Mountain Terrace, and then that whole neighborhood, the bird courts and et cetera, that people could use it as well as park users. I was also curious about some of the senior apartments, like some of the older apartments in town. So I know with the new Cal Green standard that you talked about, some of these building owners already have to put them in or have to make them EV ready, but maybe not put in the chargers. But like the Parkland senior apartments that are over at Rosewood and Parkland Farms Boulevard, or even the Canyon Run apartments, those are older apartments that I'm sure we're not required to put these in. And I could see, a use case where you have, a senior who, county workers are coming to check on them and they're driving their EV up that has a small battery and they could charge and then, drive back, or a senior care facility attendant who maybe commutes here from Petaluma and is, working with a senior at those affordable apartments, or even someone, obviously someone who lives there as well. So it could have like a multi-use case for those apartment buildings. And I know the Air District partners, our Air District partners with BACMID, and they offer rebate programs and incentive programs, which is how I think we originally paid for some of our charging infrastructure in the city. We got grants from the Air District to do that. So would we be able, if like the city installed at the community center, could we stack some of this money with those grants that exist from the Air District?
We can certainly investigate that. To my knowledge, you are correct. We did get Cal EVIP funding to support some of the costs for the recent charger installations. They were predominantly funded by our Cap and Invest funds, but we can certainly investigate what other supplemental funding is available. It does tend to have fairly strict requirements or very strict equity definitions. For example, like only certain census tracts being allowed, but we can certainly investigate them.
Okay. And then I think the idea of having some more level 3 chargers in the city would be great, because that way people aren't sitting on them overnight and you're getting, as Councilmember Higley said, you're getting a huge chunk of battery in a short period of time. But the EV rebate program that we talked about, I really like the idea of offering a rebate similar to what PG&E is offering everybody else in the county. I would love the idea of us being better, so ours could be $5,000 if theirs is $4,000. But having it be for both new and used, I think the idea that this is going to move the needle on a new car is probably unlikely because they're so expensive, but just having more flexibility in the program, given we have a lot of other programs that seemingly are not getting big uptake. And then it being available for both lease and for purchase, and figuring out how to make that work. And then, yeah, I think to Councilmember Mitchell's point, using these one-time funds to invest in this long-term infrastructure that we know we're going to need with more charging infrastructure. And I think in general, just maximizing the usability of it from, in public places where it's not just, one homeowner, they get to charge their one car at night, but it could be in a public space where you've got, a bunch of different use cases. City vehicles could charge there if need be. Visitors could charge, local residents could charge, workforce who's commuting, like at Councilmember Higley's work, they have people who don't have chargers at home, but they're driving to work at the community center. Maybe some of our city staff want to get an EV, but they don't have charging at home, and they could plug in at the community center if they're working there, or going up there for a meeting and going back to some other city site. So I just like the idea of like thinking of it from a lens of how could we maximize the different use cases of these public chargers, and then knowing that care customers are kind of going to get that extra benefit of the 50% off. And I liked your suggestion of like, how do we get more people to take the uptake on that 50%? So whether it's your first month free or some sort of incentive program, I think just trying to get more people to be aware of it and utilize it would be really helpful. And I think looking at some of the new affordable housing that's getting built and just getting those original questions answered, we have a lot of new housing units coming online, and figuring out how do we ensure that if folks wanted to have EVs and live in those apartments, that they would be able to do it. I think the program that's on your slide that talks about, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to the slide really quick. Give me 2 seconds. It talks about the home EV charger rebate, up to the one that we're offering now, up to $2,000 and an additional $2,000 if you need to upgrade your panel, but you have to enroll in the home energy load management program. I feel like for anyone who's that seems like there's like several barriers to get in if you're a care customer for the home energy load management program. I'm not totally sure how easy it is for people to understand what that means and then understand how to opt into it. But I could see that being a program that's really not going to work for a lot of people versus the 50% discount or the charger rebate. And I'm totally open to the idea of adding level 3 onto that rebate program that we already offer. But I don't know if up to $5,000 per connector is really a meaningful amount of money, given how much they cost to install. That's the part I think we don't know how much it would cost. So knowing if if it costs, $100,000 and we're offering a $5,000 rebate, people might think that's kind of not going to move the needle one way or the other. And then the e-bike rebate, I'm okay to what you recommend to just increase it a little bit from 700 to 1,000. I feel like those bikes are pretty expensive, so I'm okay with increasing the amount. And again, it sounds like we're not getting that many folks who are taking advantage of it anyways, but I think increasing the dollar figure might help a little bit. Like if we're offering a $700 incentive on a $2,000 bicycle, people are like, I still can't afford this. So maybe making it a little bit more would be helpful. And then I think also talking to some of our city departments around what are we asking them to do, like with fleet electrification, like we're requiring a lot of new city trucks to be like the electric F-250s and or other types of equipment. Do we have the city infrastructure needed to actually make that work? And if not, should we be looking at some of these as options for those things? And the community center site would be maybe a multiple bang for your buck because we can charge there for some of our city vehicles. But then, what about the fire department or the corp yard or other places where we know we have charging needs? And should we be thinking about that too?
Yeah, I really like Councilman Hagley's pilot program, particularly in some of the areas with the newer housing in it, because that would not only start the electric car process, but then when your hot water heater goes out, you've already prepared for that electric hot water heater. If you wanted to replace your heating system, you're already prepared for that. I definitely like the used car purchase process, the rebate for that. And I think that the e-bike thing has really been one of our most effective programs. And if we could up that to a second bike so families could go riding, I think that would encourage some more use of that fund, because when we look at the statistics, that was the most used program that we've put out there as far as the dollar. So those are my thoughts on this.
Could I ask a clarifying question on that?
Yeah.
Are you suggesting that it be up to 2 bikes for any Healdsburg resident or up to 2 bikes for a care household?
For a care household.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm a little unclear about the ability for us to designate like certain apartment complexes. I love the idea that you put forward there, but I didn't see that jump out initially in the presentation. Is there a hurdle to saying if we wanted to do it at Canyon Run or someplace like that to install chargers in those places?
There's no hurdle to offering the rebate. We do currently offer a rebate to those properties. So the multifamily can get $5,000 per connector. And there's other statewide programs too that also offer pretty substantial rebates to multifamily properties. I think the barrier there is more so the property management capacity to lead that type of project, and also the available parking, which of determining which spaces would be EV parking spots. Something that the city could do and that other publicly owned utilities are looking at is like technical assistance for an expert, like an engineer, to come in and say, this is your existing capacity on this property. Here's the best spot to put EV chargers in terms of like how much wiring you would need to do. So there are other POUs looking into how they can provide more technical assistance to multifamily properties, again, to overcome one more step of the barriers.
Yeah, so Councilmember Kelly, maybe you can clarify your proposal to me anyway. Does that change what you were suggesting at all, or?
Well, I think about it from this context of like the vast majority of our care customers are living, I believe, I'm assuming, but I believe, are living in larger apartment complexes that are owned by entities like Eden Housing that owns both the Randall and the Foss Creek Court Apartments, or Burbank Housing, which owns Harvest Grove, Canyon Run, the Parkland Senior Apartments, Fitch Mountain Terrace Senior Apartments. I mean, there's like a few entities that have that are the managers of the land that manage the vast majority of affordable housing units in Healdsburg. And then obviously Burbank is doing the North Village site and 155 Dry Creek. And so I think it wouldn't be an insurmountable conversation to reach out to some of those entities to say, hey, we've got these grant programs or these dollars available. You have a number of our care customers living in your buildings. Is there an interest level in installing chargers on your land? And if so, what are the barriers? And if they're like, we do housing, we don't do vehicle electrification, that is not in our wheelhouse, then maybe the recommendation would be that we provide technical assistance or connect them with somebody that does technical assistance to figure out, is it feasible and can we bring those chargers to those sites? I think that's a great point you raise about the parking constraints, because we know that a lot of these sites already have parking constraints. Like a lot of people that park along Grove Street here live at the Eden Housing Apartments on the other side of the Montessori, and they overflow park over here. So that might not work for Eden, but they have access to these chargers at City Hall and people are using them. So I think just looking at being really pragmatic around like, we have a few thousand residents that are living in these specific, sites, Eden and Burbank and, Freebird. Can we have a meeting of staff and figure out what would they be interested in? Could we help literally and figuratively plug them into these programs? And then what are the steps to get them there? I mean, that could be another way. And they just say, this is not what we do. It'll upset a million different systems we have in place about parking equity. Then we know that we can't move forward with that. We really have to focus on other programs or city-owned sites.
Thank you. So those suggestions seem useful to you? I mean, I like it because it keeps the focus squarely on low income. And I think that's really the goal here. That's the guidance here, right?
Yeah, and if I may, one of the other aspects of the local low income definition is that it's within 0.5 mile walking distance to an affordable housing location. So if the local low income definition is adopted tonight, we could also look at what public parking sites are within relatively easy walking distance of affordable multifamily properties.
Okay. One site that hasn't been mentioned, I don't know if it's possible or not, is the library. Definitely a lot of low-income people use the library. A lot of people use it, but why has that been excluded?
I don't know that it was intentionally excluded, as it just wasn't listed as one of those 4 initial sites, but we can certainly add it to the list.
Okay. So I think the increase in the e-bike rebate, it is a really strong suggestion. I see just a lot more of those happening, and sort of a gateway really to electric vehicles. And I think that, in terms of certainly encouraging electrification in low-income communities, that's going to be, if we can advertise it better and we can enhance the offering, that's going to be successful, like you mentioned. And so that would also include allowing for a second bike also. So that idea was appealing to me. The community center site seems like there's consensus on that being a valuable one. And then I saw Georgie Park come up a couple of times. And I think, while we're trying to spread these out geographically, that one seems to make sense as well. And then, as far as rebates, I was attracted to the idea that that we could mirror the PG&E rebate program, but we should do it one better, and maybe it's just symbolic too. But I think that we have the capacity, and it sounds like we may have the funds that allow us to make that move as a statement, and also just to enhance the value of the whole program to, citywide, seems valuable. So that's my input on this issue. I'm not sure if we're close to getting you all the direction you need on this, though. So can you tell me where the loose ends are in your mind?
Sure. And I think I've gotten a good bit of direction. I'd remind that the resolution tonight is specifically about the low income definition, adopting the definition, and adopting the updates to existing transportation electrification programs. The other programs like the public chargers and the EV purchase rebate, I took down lots of notes. I'll be able to kind of develop the proposals for what these new programs could look like, and we'd come back to council at another time for those.
Okay, great.
So I think the only potential edit I heard is for the resolution adopting the updates to existing programs. I'm hearing at least 2 council members would like care customers to be allotted up to 2 e-bike rebates.
Yeah, I agree. I see 3 of us. Okay, we're good there too.
So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt a definition of low income for purposes of usage of funds received through the state low carbon fuel standard program, and authorize the updates to the programs funded by funds received through the state low carbon fuel standard program for transportation electrification that includes up to 2 e-bikes for care customers, and with the recommended $1,000 amount that you presented for the e-bike rebate.
Second.
Does that work? Does that motion fit within the definition you're looking for?
Yes, I was looking at Samantha to make sure that also authorizes the other proposed updates as well.
Do we have a second?
David? Yeah.
Okay. Second, we have a roll call on that, please.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Edwards?
Yes.
Mayor Harrod?
Yes. All right. Congratulations. That was a challenging one.
Mayor,
And thank you so much for all your work on this. I know it's been probably quite a journey and more to come, right? So
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
can I just make one
you.
real quick
Oh,
comment?
yeah, absolutely.
So I heard a couple comments about, there was an impact of parking, or you drive by and nobody's ever using them. I think, having owned an EV for a very short period, your perspective changed to suddenly it's, wow, there's a parking spot because my car was going to park somewhere. And so I think as we do this transition, then, your perspective starts to change a little bit where those aren't obnoxious empty spots. It's a spot waiting for an EV to come in. So that's, I'll just share that.
All right. Thank you. So we're close to 3 hours here, and we do have a couple items coming. Does anybody need a quick break? Yes. Let's 5 minutes enough? 5 minutes. I'm going to be the bathroom break mayor, guys. All right. So we will reconvene at 8:57. Is the mic back on? It is. All right. Okay, we will begin the meeting again. And item 9B, fiscal year 2026-27 and 27-28 budget development overview. Finance Director Katie Edgar, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Katie Edgar, Finance Director, here tonight to present an overview of the fiscal year 26-27 and 27-28 budget development process. The proposed action tonight is to receive a presentation from City staff on the budget development plan for the upcoming 2-year budget cycle, and to provide feedback and direction to staff on the goals, timeline, and public participation elements of the budget development plan. Next slide, please. Before diving right into the budget timeline and process, I would like to take a moment to highlight the main revenue and expense components of the general fund. The first chart reflects the current fiscal year 25-26 budgeted revenues by source, totaling $19.9 million. For most California cities, property tax is the largest source of discretionary revenues. However, thanks to our vibrant downtown and business community, the city is a sales tax importer, which means non-residents generate more of our sales tax than residents. As a result, sales and use tax is currently the largest source of revenues in the general fund at 31%, with property taxes following closely behind at 27%. Transient occupancy taxes and permits and fees from development are the next largest contributors, representing approximately 8% each. While property tax is very dependable and inelastic revenue source, sales tax, TOT, and development fees are all elastic sources, which means that they are sensitive to economic conditions and do tend to fluctuate more. Next slide, please. Moving on to expenses, this chart illustrates general fund expenses by department for the current fiscal year, totaling $20.7 million. As you can see, public safety represents the largest portion, collectively expending 63% of the city's general fund resources. The remaining major players are finance, city manager's office, and community development, all using between 12 to 10% each. Next slide, please. This chart breaks down the general fund expenses by function. Approximately 69% of the general fund budget supports the wages and benefits of 70 full-time employees and 20 part-time employees. The next largest category is internal service fees at 15%, which represents the cost of information services, building maintenance, fleet, and insurance. Operational costs, including contracted services, supplies, and equipment, make up another 11%. In fiscal year 25-26, 5% of the general fund expenses are supporting transfers to other funds, including streets, the long-range planning fund, and the building maintenance fund. Looking forward to the next budget cycle, a major challenge will continue to be the rising cost of wages and benefits for employees, as well as other rising costs, including the liability, property, and workers' compensation insurance coverages, CalPERS unfunded accrued liability, or UAL costs associated with employee pensions, and equipment and materials costs that have been affected by inflation over the last few years. It is important to note that these rising costs are not specific to the general fund and will impact many of the city funds discussed tonight. Next slide, please. Measure T is the city's half-a-cent transactions and use tax that is collected on all sales that occur within city limits. This tax is also collected on motor vehicle sales when the vehicle is registered to an address within the city. As you can see in the chart above, this revenue has been fairly consistent since 2022 and is projected to remain relatively flat in the upcoming 2-year cycle. Looking forward to the budget process, this fund supports many ongoing costs like public safety positions, local partnerships, and low-income utility discounts. So discussions will primarily be focused on prioritizing our capital project needs and balancing the timelines of those projects. Next slide, please. This pie chart represents the fiscal year 25-26 budget expenditures for the Community Services Fund, of which approximately 38% or $3.7 million of the annual operating budget of $9.7 million supports 17 full-time employees and approximately 104 part-time employees. Another 24% is contributed towards operating expenses and supplies, with 13% supporting capital projects, primarily the Foley Community Pavilion project in the current year. As we look forward to the upcoming budget cycle, the capital project funding needs are anticipated to continue as we shift our focus to the Badger Park redevelopment project and the Laura Fish Summersall Park projects that are nearing the construction phase. Next slide, please. Enterprise funds represent business-type activities where the city sells services to the public for a fee. This includes the city's utilities like water, sewer, electric, drainage, as well as the airport. The three major utilities, water, sewer, and electric, have adopted rate increases through fiscal year 26-27. A challenge for all the utility funds in the upcoming budget cycle will be the funding and timing of capital projects and the completion of a new cost of service studies. Next slide, please. There are many other funds that will be included in the upcoming budget cycle. There are a few examples listed on the slide in front of you, but for additional context, the city has a total of 62 funds. Next slide, please. The proposed budget timeline before you is color coordinated based on key stakeholders. The green dates signify council engagement and start with tonight's development overview. The purple dates signify public engagement opportunities and start with the launching of the public engagement tools in February, followed closely by 2 public budget workshops. The Finance Department key deadlines are indicated with the light blue and begin in early February when finance staff will distribute all administrative cost estimates to the departments and department head operational budget development process will begin. While we continue to collect feedback from the public, staff will return to council on February 17th to present the mid-year financial update and provide biennial reviews of the pension and surplus policies. Next up in March, after a full month of collecting community feedback, we will close the online public engagement tools and begin summary and analysis of the feedback. On March 25th, Council will hold its annual strategic goal setting special meeting, and in early April, finance staff will begin meeting with the department heads and the city manager to complete evaluation of the proposed budgets. Then staff will return to Council on April 20th to provide an update on the budget development and share the results of the public engagement efforts. The final department deadline for all revisions is in late April to provide enough time for finance to prepare for the Council budget workshop special meeting on May 11th. After the workshop, staff will return to Council at the regularly scheduled meeting on May 18th to provide the third quarter financial update. The final step of the budget development process is budget adoption, which is proposed for June 1st, strategically leaving the second meeting in June available as a backup to ensure timely adoption in the event of unanticipated delays. Next slide, please. Staff are proposing 5 goals for the upcoming fiscal year 26 through 28 budget development process. The first is to continue aligning budget resources with council goals. The next goal is to prioritize infrastructure funding as we have many projects entering the construction phase with additional funding needs and even more deferred maintenance that needs to be programmed. Staff are also proposing to increase technology transparency by updating accounting methods to more easily identify subscription-based software services to align with updated guidance from the Government Accounting Standards Board. The next goal is to review finance policies to ensure the foundational framework continues to promote and facilitate positive change. And the final goal is to continue to expand public engagement. Next slide, please. In the last budget cycle, we launched the Public Engagement Simulation Tool, which offered an online budget simulation where the public was asked to make recommendations for the city's budget by adjusting spending and revenue across various categories to present a balanced budget. This year, we plan to continue making 2 versions of the simulation available in both English and Spanish. The first will be an abbreviated version that captures broader feedback and can be completed more quickly, while the second will be a more in-depth version that allows more opportunities for focused feedback. The short version will also be available in a paper format to eliminate any technological barriers. Next slide, please. New this year, we will also be launching a prioritized tool that will allow all members of the public to allocate available funding by selecting the projects that are important to them and placing them in order of priority. This tool may look familiar to some of you as it was used in past council goal setting meetings. Staff are still developing the proposed projects list and welcome any feedback the council may have on potential projects or priorities to include. Next slide, please. The final expansion to public engagement will be the taxpayer receipt tool. This tool allows members of the public to answer a few simple questions like what their age, salary, and property value is if they own a home, and receive a personalized taxpayer receipt that estimates the amount of sales and property taxes they will pay and how those taxes are used to support the various general fund activities. We hope that with the broader array of engagement opportunities, we can continue to improve by meeting the public where they are. More information on how to participate will be available in the coming weeks. Next slide, please. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. Who'd like to go first? Yep, no questions? Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do we know a date that the budget tool is going to be coming online?
We do not have a date for launching that yet, but it should be coming soon in February.
Okay, and then we are about 1.5 years into our water and sewer rate increase. How are we compared to where we projected we'd be? Are we on track, below track, or how is that increase looking?
That is a great question. So on the electric side and the sewer side, we are fairly well on track to what our projections were. On the water side, revenues have exceeded projections, not due to, I should say, due to increased usage. We're seeing more usage has increased more than what we thought it would during the rate setting process. People have continued to use more water, which just results in more sales.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? No? I just have a quick one. First of all, I just want to notice that it's going to be the exact same council that's going through the budget process as last time. I think that's kind of unusual. And, I would invite you to weigh in on what you thought could have been done better last time at some point. That might be welcome to hear, because you wouldn't normally get to have that opportunity. But the prioritized tool, I think, is going to be interesting, and I'm hoping that the council will have, maybe there's not time, but some opportunity to contribute to what appears on that. So let me know if that's possible or not.
Yeah, if you have ideas, I'm ready to take them now.
Oh, well, there's a lot to that. That's a really big question. So maybe that's something we would just have to email to the city manager.
Absolutely. You can send them an email at any
All right.
time.
I was just going to say the same. Obviously, we do want that feedback tonight. If you have it, if you feel like you want to sit with this, if you were to pass on ideas to us, there's no hard limit here. We don't want, 300 things for people to rank, but otherwise good ideas are good ideas and more data is better. So.
Well, I think probably a lot of us are starting to tally up ideas for goal setting. And, thinking that's a couple months away or a month away or whatever it is, that we're not ready to pull the trigger on those just yet. And then they're not approved, they haven't been voted on by the council. So, but that doesn't mean they couldn't enter into, an idea gathering tool like this. So.
Yeah, I think good idea. We'd welcome feedback of that nature. I will say what we're trying to do on the staff level is not necessarily to come up with new ideas that might be appropriate for the council, but things that are known needs. My hope would be anything that we put into that tool for prioritization would be something that you would look at and nods and say, yeah, I know what that is. That's something, whether or not it's going to rise to the top of the list, that we all kind of have identified as things we'd like to invest in. That doesn't mean it has to be that, but that's kind of where the staff mindset is.
Okay. One more quick question. You mentioned there were going to be workshops this month. Do we have dates for those?
No, the dates for this tool and the workshops are still being formulated, but they should be out within the next week.
Okay. Councilmember Kelly?
One of the pieces of feedback on the app or the budget tool I called it an app, but that's mobile enabled, that I got the last go around was that we use a lot of city vernacular. Like we had something like beautify West Plaza parking lot. And I had people asking me, what is West Plaza parking lot? Like no one calls it that in the community except for insiders, or it repair the bridges that connect West Plaza Park to West Plaza parking lot. And so maybe using language that's a little bit more like the bridge that connects the farmer's market parking lot to the entrance towards the plaza or something like that. Just so that if people have not been engaged in the making of the sausage at City Hall, they could still participate meaningfully. Or if there are specific projects that we're going to ask for people to stack rank, that we have some sort of place to direct them to read about those things, since it may not be totally clear within the character limit of those options what some of those projects are. And then I think in the past, we had done some really great outreach with community partners, like at the Senior Center where we did the paper one, and a Spanish language workshop with Corazon, working with kind of other community groups to really get good feedback, the chamber as well. I think just ensuring that we go to where we find people where they are, as opposed to expecting them to come to us, as evidenced by the one member of the public who is in the room with us tonight as we kick off the most important process of the city, in that we're doing budget setting. And then the other thing I was going to ask was about, so a lot of our pavement and road maintenance work, we talk about this a lot, about trying to invest the small money now so that we can maintain our pavement and roads, so that we aren't spending so much money later when they've failed. How do we ensure that in the budget process, if obviously there's never going to be enough money to meet all the needs, but say we end up with, projects that we have to pull off because we don't have enough funding, but there was interest and energy around trying to fund those. Is there a way to have kind of a stack rank of things we're putting on, not necessarily the back burner, but like the side burner? And then should revenues be better than anticipated, we can bring them from the back burner to now coming into the program in this budget cycle?
Absolutely. So on the capital project front, we do a 5-year CIP plan. So while we only adopt a biennial budget, those are the projects that are funded now and can start within those years. But for the 5-year CIP, those kind of out-year projects in year 3, 4, and 5, those are often where kind of those projects where it's like, yes, we would love to do this, but we don't have the funding right now. So we list them in those 3 to 5 years as priority projects to be considered either in the next budget cycle or if funding becomes available sooner.
Does the pavement preventative maintenance program fall within the 5-year CIP or the 2-year budget cycle?
So in the last budget cycle, we did not include a generalized pavement preventative maintenance. They did alternatively include specific roads that they wanted to
Like the
repair.
March Avenue project?
Yes, exactly. And so some of those projects were included in that 5-year CIP, although I can say that during discussions this year in preparation as we're building to this, Public Works Department does have a lot of interest in putting a generic pavement preventative maintenance project back on the table.
Okay, great. I would support that. I think just generally speaking, and Larry, tell me if I'm wrong, sorry, Director Zimmer, tell me if I'm wrong, that they are able to program more dollars when dollars come available if we haven't already put that contract out for the year. So if they have a number of lists of streets, we can increase that should the money be there. And it doesn't have to go back to the very beginning of the process, potentially.
Yes, that is definitely one of the benefits of using a more generalized pavement preventative maintenance bucket.
Thanks. I really appreciate the suggestion about the nomenclature. Some people still call it the Bear Republic parking lot. I don't think we have any more questions. Public comment? Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none. I think we're good. Do you need any further direction on this?
No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for all your hard work on this and hard work to come. All right, moving on now to appointments of the City Selection Committee and Mayors and Council Members Association Board of Directors. City Clerk Karina Allen.
Bring up the PowerPoint. The recommended action this evening is to review the letters of interest received and direct the mayor or his alternate on how to vote at the upcoming meeting taking place on February 12th. And also authorizing the mayor or his alternate to vote on any late nominations that may be received at that meeting. On the next slide is a short table of the 2 committees that are open and the letters that were received, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Nothing else.
Okay. All right. Well, who'd like to go first? Bill, we could ask for public comment first, I guess. Sure. Yeah. Any public comment on this item? Scott?
Important person.
Yeah. Got to check in with you, man. All right. Thank you. Seeing none, I'll open it up. Go ahead.
I would like to suggest that we nominate this guy named David Hagley. I don't know him well, but I've heard his name. No, I'm just kidding. I would love to support Councilmember Hagley's position on the Aviation Commission. I think that we get to select two is great. I think all three candidates in that category are fantastic. Councilmember for Vice Mayor Potter in Windsor, I feel like Windsor receives so much impact from the Sonoma County Airport, both in terms of air traffic and just traffic in general, and it being so close to the airport. I would love to support her nomination, but I also think that Mayor Stapp is a great contributor. So I guess I would like to suggest, Councilmember Haig in the order that they appear on our slide, but to give the mayor the flexibility to also have to vote on the fly if need be, depending on how it goes. And then for the Child Care Planning Council, I was really impressed by Karen. Is it Now? Is that how you say her last name's resume? I don't know much about her professional background, and so that letter was really helpful in knowing more about her background. I have worked with Councilmember Rodriguez from Roanoke Park quite a bit in a variety of different projects and programs, and I'm always very impressed by her level of professionalism and her interest in serving in this capacity. And she's done a lot of work with youth in the community in the region. So I would like to suggest either Samantha as our number one, and then Karen, based on her professional experience, as our number two. Stephen has already served on this council, and I would love to see other folks get an opportunity to have an opportunity to be involved as well.
Okay. Vice Mayor? Yep.
Yeah, so I think David Hagley probably could serve Healdsburg well on the Aviation Commission. And I agree with your order. I think Tanya Potter and the impact that Windsor has from the airport, and they're two smaller cities too. I think that it's good to get people representing our smaller cities on these county-wide commissions. And so I would agree with that order. On the child care, I was very impressed with Karen. Now I know her a little bit too more now. I would like to see her as the first. I think also Steven Zollman, he's been on the commission, but he's done a lot of good work on that. So those would be kind of my choices. Karen 1, Steven 2, and Samantha 3.
Yeah, I agree. This Mr. Hagley would be an excellent choice. And Potter, Tanya, for the two smaller cities, and we're in the flight path. I mean, we really are affected by this. And on the child seat, I think Stephen has really put a lot of dedication into child care. I mean, from the beginning of the ballot measures, he is just a raging advocate for children's services. So I would put him number one, and Karen Now is number 2.
Yeah.
Or Vice Mayor, can you tell me what you mean about the ballot measure, what you're referring to?
Trying to remember the one that was on last year, the year before ballot with the child care. Measure A.
Our Kids, Our Future measure.
Our Kids, Our Future.
Stephen Zollman he withdrew his support of that measure and was one of the few council members across the entire county who didn't support it.
Yeah, and the reason for him not supporting it was because of some of the ways it was going to be administered. So I was in the room when he explained it. It was a very good explanation to me, and I feel comfortable with recommending him, because it wasn't that he didn't agree with the funds, it was how it was going to be distributed and who was going to be overlooking it. And he was particularly concerned that women of color who mainly do child care would have a seat at the table and a strong voice. And he did not feel that was being expressed well enough in the way that it was being structured. So that was why he withdrew his support from that.
Okay. Member Hagley. Who do you like?
Yeah, part of the reason I put my name in is, I've served on a number of boards, and I come in with, and it's not necessarily just representing Healdsburg, it's the feedback for the general area as well, and representing the mayors and council members. Yeah, I think, Mark, I think from Santa Rosa, great choice. Tanya, Windsor definitely has way more impact than Healdsburg does in terms of just anytime I'm down there, friend's house, you got planes flying right over. So there's a lot of feedback there. So I agree with the council recommendations on that, that I think you got the dealer's choice there at the meeting. And then for the Child Care Planning Council, I was really impressed with Karen's. I don't think I really know her too well, but I was impressed with her letter. Samantha, she's great. I like Samantha, known her for a while, and I think she's very passionate, does a great job. So those would be my top two.
Interesting. So in the first group, I think it's pretty cut and dry. And Mark would really serve this commission really well. He's a fantastic leader, and I would like to give the nod to Potter for the same reasons that were given here. It's still super questionable about Hagley, but actually, David, you're really well suited to this, and I appreciate your putting your hand up for this position, and wish you luck, and be happy to support you and advocate for you for that. So that one's pretty cut and dry. We have kind of a shuffled result, and so I'd like to discuss the Child Care Planning Council selections. Personally, number one for me is Rodriguez, and I'm pretty torn between the other two. And I think I would give the nod to Zolman, right? And, but I could be swayed. So I don't know if I'd just like to bring it back to the group and just see where we're at there. It sounded probably like more folks who again had now in their top two. Would you raise your hand? Okay, so that's a done deal. Okay, so fine. So and I believe Rodriguez is number one, or was she? Maybe she's number two. I mean, for me, she was my first choice, but and your first choice, right? That's key.
Either one of those two is good for me.
Okay.
Either one of which two?
Karen or Samantha.
Okay. All right.
So do we have a number? I mean, you're going to have to pick one to nominate at the meeting, right? And
yeah.
And is that going to be Samantha? Is that
yes.
where we're at? Okay. Just want to confirm.
Okay.
That.
So it's Samantha, Karen, and Stephen will be third. Okay. I think we're good there. Any questions?
So I would like to make a motion that our recommendations are, I believe, the order of the first slide, which is David Hagley, Tanya Potter, and Mark Stapp. And then the Samantha Rodriguez, Karen Now, and Stephen Zolman in that order for the second one.
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Hagley.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Yes.
Mayor Herod.
Yes. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to council reports on matters of interest. Who would like to go first on this one? Councilmember Mitchell.
I don't have anything to report.
Easy. Okay. Who's next? Vice Mayor Edwards.
Yeah, I attended the repair fair, which was an incredibly good, successful. I think the number one item that was brought in was a KitchenAid stand mixer. And they repaired 3 of those and saved those from the dumps. And they'd been making cookies for families for many years. There are some upcoming repair fairs. The next one is going to be in Petaluma on the 7th, Cloverdale on March 7th, and Windsor on April 19th. I also went with our mayor, Healdsburg Community Arts Education Forum at the 222 last Sunday, which was really a nice event, a good turnout. It was really nice to see our youth commissioner really step up and shine on that commission, just doing an incredible job. Feels good that we supported somebody who just really is jumping in there, and like she's been on it for a year. So those are the 2 events I went to.
David.
I attended NCPA's Strategic Issues Conference in Sacramento. Drove up after our last meeting. I got there pretty late. Very valuable meeting. And then I also on Friday DJ'd the FFA Polenta feed at the Alexander Valley Hall for the Healdsburg High School. And it was my first DJ set that was all country music. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Did you have your boots on?
No.
Sounds good. All right.
Nothing to report.
Okay. So yeah, the arts education meeting that was great. Great recap, Vice Mayor Edwards. And it's just a tremendous amount of energy and passion for the arts initiatives, various spokes in the Arts and Culture Master Plan. This is just one of them. And I'm really grateful for the leadership of Linus Lancaster coming from the high school, kind of initiated this. So they invited me to say a few remarks, and it was just a really fantastic event. So glad to be part of that. And then I was invited by Congressman Mike Thompson to attend a meeting on Thursday. This came together very quickly, mind you. And it was Sonoma County mayors, and we had 8 of the 9, and police chief and some other law enforcement people. The DA was there, and people from the Office of Emergency Management from the county were there to discuss a question that's on a lot of people's minds: what would happen if ICE came to our area, like it came to Minneapolis or other places? And of course, a lot of people are asking this question. A lot of people are worried and don't know, what direction our communities would take. And obviously, there's a lot of questions and a lot of unknowns, and there wasn't a lot of really clear takeaways, though there was, I think, the foundation for communication among the mayors, for starters, and I can thank Mayor Stapp, who recommended that the MCA take some leadership in creating a communication hub amongst the city leaders in the county if something should come up. And the other big component was that the Office of Emergency Management's looking at, the possibility of large-scale protests or chaos or what have you as something very akin to a natural disaster, that they share a lot of the same features and problems and types of response. So they're looking like what would happen. That's their whole job, is to prepare for things that haven't happened yet. So they're looking, what would we do in these cases to help, families that are separated and, other kinds of human issues that and impacts that might happen in a situation like that. All very dark stuff, mind you, but they're working at it, and so they'll have some idea of how they might respond if things should happen to go in that direction. And then I asked a question about a proposal that we've seen about cities making a policy or resolution that would limit ICE's ability to use public lands. And there just seems to be a general agreement, though I'm sure others disagree, but that that sort of policy is not really going to be effective when it really comes down to it, and unenforceable. And and the DA was pretty clear cut about that in her assessment of that idea. So yeah, I guess probably more to come on that in different places and with different ideas. But it was, I was grateful for Congressman Thompson for bringing us together with this very difficult issue and just to get us all thinking. And it's something we can all, and I've talked to a city manager about it a little bit. And also the police chief. And so thank you for those conversations. Once again, not a lot of clear answers, too many unknowns, but it's still something to kind of keep up as we move through the new year. So I don't know if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer them, but okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, I think we're ready to